West here, reporting from Houston, Texas for Climate Desk. Now, one of the biggest uncertainties in climate science right now is the role of clouds. What better way to work that part out than flying right through them? That's what NASA scientists aboard this airplane think. Welcome to NASA's biggest airborne laboratory. You're coming with us today on an 8-hour NASA flight mission.
When you read these big IPCC climate assessments, what's the biggest uncertainty? There's two, right? The role of aerosols and clouds. Clouds is probably bigger than aerosols.
That is a piece of a puzzle that right now we are missing.
You can't get the models right if you don't understand the chemistry and the process.
Now we're being told we've got to get on. The doors are about to shut, so let's go aboard. Every time you turn on the weather, every time you hear a climate change prediction, that information has to come from somewhere. And it starts by getting sucked out of the air from planes like this.
This mission is to particularly try to understand the emissions from the surface, so mostly biogenic emissions, so from trees and other plants.
Right now we're flying to our very first part of this experiment on the DC-8. Over Arkansas, there's a particularly pungent bouquet of emissions that scientists are interested in measuring.
Well, these emissions lead to both aerosols and to molecules that both destroy and create ozone. So these are very important things to understand for climate studies.
How it will manifest itself, it will be in more accurate and more reliable predictions.
So what we're doing is taking a series of flyovers, each at a different level of the atmosphere, scooping up those emissions, testing them, and hopefully scientists are going to see exactly what's in this column of air all the way up.
The data that we collect in one flight can keep busy 60 scientists and students for 3 years, 4 years. We're still studying data from data collected 20 years ago.
In fact, this particular mission today is its most heavily equipped in its nearly 30 years of service. Each one of these consoles here is a specially equipped scientific instrument designed to collect all sorts of different data in real time.
And this instrument here tracks the sun.
They're used to strip soluble gases.
This black line is the CO2. It's about 390 ppm right now.
We're putting these filters in the bags that we've got the aerosols that we trapped out of a certain amount of air. And so we're sampling up here about 150 liters a minute.
That ultimately flows back into the operational models. It flows back into what goes on TV every day.
Anyway, I got to get this sample going.
You do it. It's a busy man at work. We can't let him rest. Well, get this. We've just spent 2 hours crisscrossing this one cloud formation. In, back out again, back in again.
Then they grow, and we track them as long as we can, and then we let it go.
Even one cloud can hold a host of answers to the mysteries of climate change.
The patterns of, where the clouds are, what type of clouds we see, what kind of weather systems they're associated with it, that'll all be shifting in a shifting climate, in a world with climate change.
Then the big spark is this, is when we actually get the meat on the grill. And then it will be some time to process it.
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
What the frack?
President Obama, are you fracking kidding me?
Reopen the EPA studies. In Texas, Wyoming, and Pennsylvania.
Fracking pollutes our oceans.
Fracking poisons our water.
Fracking makes climate change worse.
Fracking relies on toxic chemicals that cause cancer.
Ban fracking now.
Ban fracking now.
Go on. Ban it.
Ban fracking now.
Please.
We came here to Foster City,
where we're going to watch UC Berkeley, a University of California SWAT team, do a hostage rescue scenario.
All personnel will wear the proper protective equipment. This includes all personnel identified as staff, students, role players, EIDs, and support staff. Face, eyes, throat, and groin protection is mandatory and should be worn at all times by personnel directly involved in or near the scenario. Always check your mask prior to use to ensure there are no cracks and the mask is in safe working condition.
Should I put the water in there now?
Yeah, go ahead. This is like some kind of chemical agent.
Yeah. Copy, we're ready. I'm gonna get shot. I already know it, dude. Feeney's yelling at me.
Help me. Your hands. Help me. Your hands. Back to me.
Gentlemen, we have a tentacle. We need to pull our person out. Get these guys out of here. Pull them out. Put your hands on your face. Put your hands on your face. Keep him covered.
Your head up. He's got a shotgun back there.
That's all right. Keep his hands up where we can.
Hands on your face.
Hands on your face. On your face.
Someone cover me. I got a holster up, bro.
Okay, pull him around the corner. Pick him up. Get him out of the building. Quickly. We've got this. Let's get that guy out of there. You, come towards us. Keep your hands on your face. Turn around. Face away from us. Back towards us. Quickly. Back up towards me. Quickly. Pull him out of the room.
We're exfilling, Billy.
Yes, we are exfilling.
It was actually around 92, 94, there was an attack on the chancellor at his residence, which is on campus. And we realized at the time that we didn't have any resources to deal with that kind of threat when it took place. So, and I think about 15 years before, they had some kind of semblance of a SWAT team. So they regenerated the idea of activating a SWAT team.
And then since then, you guys have kind of branched out to doing what kind of stuff?
Well, since then, we train for everything. We train for every eventuality, barricaded subjects. Like I said, most of what we do is high-risk warrants.
And it's something like it could be like a mugging kind of thing, just like on the street.
Depends.
Or
I mean,
like
a mugging, but if it's armed, particularly.
Right, an armed mugging.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. And then obviously we're looking for training for anything else. That we might be faced with. And that's what's great about Urban Shield is, we couldn't duplicate this on our own.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Good morning. Welcome to The Bill Press Show for this Friday, June 26th, 2015. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress here for Bill Press. On this busy Friday morning, lots of things to cover. Both what already happened at the court, what might happen at the court, and everything in between. So good to be with you and the whole Bill Press team. But breaking overnight, before we get into all the rest of the news of the day, is a possible terror attack in France. A report that one person was killed in a suspected attack on a factory. Apparently, a Islamist flag was found flying at the door of that factory. And certainly investigators are on the scene, and the Prime Minister of France has tightened security in that country.
Yeah, it's just happening not very long ago, so we're still short on details, but that's happening. We're going to keep an eye on it all morning long, so stay with us for sure.
Please do. And you can watch us, of course, on TawkrTV. That's youtube.com/TawkrTV. TawkrTV.
That's how you spell Talker.
That's how you spell Talker, folks. Follow us on Twitter at BP Show on Twitter. We're, of course, on Free Speech TV as well. And on all the apps, on the iHeartRadio app, on the TuneIn app. And like us on Facebook, because why not? If you're already online, just go over to facebook.com/Bill Press Show. I'm on Twitter at Igor Volsky, and joined, of course, by other people on Twitter here in the studio. Peter Ogburn.
Look at this guy. How you doing?
Don't really know your handle. Doesn't matter.
Completely irrelevant. You shouldn't be following me.
There we go. Lisa Murphy running the board. Jamie Benson taking your calls. By the way, at 866-55-PRESS.
Oh, here we go already. Messing up with the phone number. Oh, boy.
So close. It's not like I've done this before or anything. 866-557-7377. 866-557-7377. And Cyprian Bolding, of course, running our cameras here in studio. And I got to say, guys, it's so fortunate that I feel like I'm here today because Obamacare and healthcare reform is something I've been reporting on extensively and in great detail going back to 2008 and followed the entire sausage-making process from when Obama was elected to the first initial exciting drafts of the law when Kennedy convened a healthcare group to really talk about it, and you had like industry there and lawmakers there and a White House summit about it, and we thought Tom Daschle was going to do it. Anyway, those are the good old days.
Lord,
I know. I like to reminisce on days like this. And here we are, 5 years later, I think. I'm bad at math.
Feels like
6
so
or
much
something.
longer.
6 years, I guess.
Much longer.
Later since then. 2 court battles later. Billions and millions of dollars spent trying to tear this law down. And at the end of the day, on this June 26th, 2015, we know that Obamacare is now double constitutional. We know that 16 million people have health care. We know that healthcare costs, the increase in healthcare costs, is a lot lower today than it was before Obamacare. And a lot of people are happy.
Yeah.
But no one is happier than me. No one is happier than me.
You were very excited yesterday when we were talking about your hosting of the show. You told me this morning you slept great knowing that Obamacare is law. It's amazing. It's a huge win.
It's really, tremendous that, first of all, we won again, the law won again, and that the decision was 6-3, that you got Kennedy on your side this time. The first case in 2012 on the mandate, he sided with the opponents. Here he is saying, look, the text of the law, those 6 words about whether or not you can provide subsidies in federal exchanges, can't just be read in isolation. They have to be read in the context of the entire Affordable Care Act. And given that, it is impossible to conclude, the justices said, that Congress wanted to trick the states and force them into building exchanges and decided to deny them subsidies because nobody was talking about that when the law was being written. All of the architects of the law have denied it, and the justices said it would undermine the entire intent of Obamacare to provide coverage for everybody. After the decision, Obama, as we saw in the White House pictures, hugged every person in sight, it feels like, and went to the Rose Garden and explained, look, you can continue attacking the law, but it's here to stay.
And today, after more than 50 votes in Congress to repeal or weaken this law, after a presidential election based in part on preserving or repealing this law, after multiple challenges to this law before the Supreme Court, the Affordable Care Act is here to stay.
And you remember...
That is such a, walk down memory lane of all the times that they tried to repeal it and all the court cases, including this one, and it's just...
Boy. I'm impressed by the fact that he kept it together. I would have been like, it's here to stay.
I know, seriously.
Dancing around the podium, doing some kind of, flailing my arms. I told you.
Pointing fingers.
Pointing fingers, doing anything and everything to let people know that that's it. And this is really, I think if you read the ruling, if you look at what happened, the significance here is that even if you have a Republican president, and this Republican president doesn't like the Affordable Care Act, of course, they can't do much about these subsidies.
Right.
And they can't instruct the IRS, which, of course, interpreted the law to give subsidies to the federal exchanges, to say that they shouldn't do that because this ruling says you have to look at the context of the law itself, not just those words.
And what's funny about all the carrying on by Republican members of Congress about the subsidies and this Obamacare is the court did them a huge favor yesterday because if they had ruled this unconstitutional, then the Republicans were going to have to find a fix for the millions of people who would lose it, who would lose their health care. And Republicans didn't want to deal with that. John Boehner certainly didn't want to deal with that. So as much as they make all this noise about how terrible it is, they didn't want to have to deal with it.
In the days leading up to this decision, you saw Republicans panic.
Yeah.
Leadership, rank and file members thinking, how are we gonna explain that 6.5 million Americans who get subsidies through the federal exchanges are going to lose it? And what are we going to do? How are we going to help them? There's been all these bills introduced, and a lot of the Republicans were hoping, well, maybe if the court rules against us, maybe they will stay it for a couple of months to give us some time to help people so that they don't totally hate us when they vote in 2016, which is really saying, this law is super unconstitutional, but we just hope that it could still remain in place for a little longer just so that we don't have to come up with any kind of solution. And the fact that they couldn't, the fact that they had years to do so, and there's nothing being offered, not from the presidential candidates, not from any Republicans in Congress, says, I think, two things. The first thing it says is, Republicans really don't have that many healthcare ideas, and they don't believe that the government should be helping people buy healthcare. Right. They believe that you should be on your own in the free market with insurers, which is fine, a fine thing to believe. We've just tried it, and it's never worked. Okay. And number two, they can't come up with anything that doesn't look like Obamacare because Obamacare itself is baked in with compromise after compromise after compromise to the point where any kind of conservative idea you can think of that's rational, that's actually going to cover people, is already in the law.
Yeah.
So good luck, guys. I'm just going to love to see Jeb Bush's next health care plan that has actual coverage provisions. I mean, you can come up with kind of a free market approach that, as they say, allows people to go across state lines and purchase coverage, and those who can't find coverage because insurers don't want to take them because they're too sick, they can go into a special pool called the high-risk pool and somehow afford coverage there. Fine, you can do all that. But the problem, Peter, is when you bring your bill to the CBO and you say, okay, tell me, how much does this cover? How many people does this cover? How much money does it save? Because the baseline now is coverage for 30 million people. That's the baseline. Anything they bring is going to suck compared to that baseline. You're going to have smaller coverage numbers, and you're not going to have any real cost reductions because the design and the philosophy of their proposals is to take all the regulation out, all of the government oversight out, and say, do it on your own. Good luck.
Have you guys ever seen Igor so excited?
I don't know.
It's a great day in America. It's a great day in America.
Let me play devil's avocado for just a moment. I'm just doing this because I'm a realist. What are the chances that this faces another big court case, another big Supreme Court case, with the political discourse being what it is?
I don't think there's any more gas left in the Republican tank to bring another case all of this way to the court.
I don't disagree with you.
Just to lose again.
Right.
And this is the other part of this decision, is that it's so sweeping in that it says, look at the context of the law. Yeah. If Republicans, as they did with this case, go through kind of provision, and find some line that they interpret it in a certain way, assign all of these motives to, and then run to the Supreme Court and say, look at this provision. This provision that I found has a totally different meaning. You will just look at the majority opinion in this decision that says, look at the intent, look at the context, and that's how you figure it out. By the way, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. We're at BP Show on Twitter. Let me know, are you as excited as I am? And do you think, I mean, maybe you agree with Peter. Maybe you think this isn't the end. I mean, who would? But maybe you do, listener, that maybe I'm too excited. Maybe I'm too happy. Maybe I'm counting the chickens before they hatch, right? That's the saying. Maybe. I think you're wrong, but maybe you disagree. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. I want to quickly get to the Republican reaction.
Oh, boy.
Of course, Ted Cruz took to the Senate floor to condemn the court.
Mark my words. Following the election in 2016, the referendum that we will have in 2017, this chamber will return, and we will repeal every word of Obamacare.
See, Speaker, that's Pastor Cruz, I think.
God.
Well, I was going to say, the thing to note about that clip there is that this position is now becoming so increasingly unpopular, Ted Cruz has to whisper it.
Yeah.
Right? He has to go like this. So
It's like
only
a hiss.
certain people hear him.
Yes. You remember when John Boehner literally said that it would be Armageddon once we got Obama? Do you remember that?
Yes.
He was on the floor of the House, and he said, "We're going to see Armageddon if this goes through." And it's gone through, and it's hardly been Armageddon. And Ted Cruz takes a different approach.
I mean, he said Armageddon. There were Republicans who were making crazy policy arguments like it's going to be the end of the private insurance industry. The private insurance industry is going to collapse. That everyone's going to be on government health care. That costs are going to blow up. That everyone's going to lose the coverage they have. And none of it happened. And 16 million people have health insurance. 10.2 million are in these exchanges. And as we move forward, as we have additional enrollment periods and more people sign up for Obamacare, this thing is going to be harder and harder to undo. Republicans can rhetorically say that, yeah, we're running for president and part of our platform is to undo Obamacare, but you just don't see it. And the reason why, you got to peek into the panic a peek into the panic just days before this decision came out. Republicans had no plan. They had no idea what to do. They had no unified approach. And that tells you that even if you have a President Bush, even if you have a President Walker or a President Christie, you won't see this thing go away. Sure, it will be amended. Sure, certain things will be twisted. Twisted in the sense that, you kind of maybe have a conservative spin on some of the provisions, but Obamacare is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, and we'll talk about it coming up here on the Bill Press Show. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County is often portrayed as a role model for the rest of the country. The county has some of the highest salaries and most expensive real estate in America, thanks in large part to the phenomenal success of tech companies such as Google, Yahoo, Intel, Adobe, and of course Apple, the nation's wealthiest and most profitable company. But Santa Clara County also has a more unseemly distinction. I'm standing near downtown San Jose, inside what is by some accounts the largest homeless encampment in America. The Jungle, as it's known, occupies a 65-acre stretch of creek where about 300 people live in makeshift structures. It's less of a homeless encampment than a full-blown shantytown.
This being the largest homeless encampment in the United States, and us having Silicon Valley with Steve Jobs and all this cash, we're not supposed to have this kind of homeless problem. You know what I mean?
I done been shot with a pellet gun like 4 times, attacked with baseball bats, my house set on fire.
This is like hell on earth. I mean, this is like something you will not see, and you have to see to believe, actually. It's like fourth world conditions.
Hi, have you ever heard of a place called the Jungle?
Sorry?
A place called the Jungle, have you heard of it?
We're not making enough money really for conventional homes or housing, and we make too much money for subsidized homes. So we're kind of, floating between the oil and the water.
We told the landlady here if it would be possible to continue staying here. She said, no, you got to go. I already rented it out. And we went and loaded things into a storage facility, and it's still there. And all the campgrounds and things that we saw were too far out of the city, like KOAs and that sort of thing. So what we decided to do was to move into the Jungle. So that's what we did.
A few days ago, a woman named Lydia Hernandez was robbed inside of her tent. When she refused to hand over the money, the robbers slit her throat. When she still fought back, they bashed her head with an axe. She died a few hours later. Residents say that the police never come into the Jungle, so they have to fend for themselves.
There's no law down there except our own, right? There's no law, so we could smoke dope all day in the open. The dope dealers ain't scared because they're secure.
We go to the Fairmont Hotel and have a brunch or do a philanthropy. That's not going to cut it. We need billions of dollars to go into the inner cities and go into the jungle. Silicon Valley, the Bay Area is known for its innovation, its progressive thinking. It's one of the most progressive pockets in the United States, if not the world, and certainly one of the wealthiest. If we can't do it here, it won't happen anywhere. It's got to happen here.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
This is the Bill Press Show.
25 minutes after the hour, the Bill Press Show for this Friday, June 26th, 2015, where we are in full party mode celebrating the Supreme Court upholding Obamacare for the second time in just, 4 years? It's been very close together, these two cases. And of course, the understanding is they'll just be these two, no more challenges. Ike from Charleston, South Carolina wants to weigh in. Ike, welcome to the program.
Hey, good morning. Real quick, if you're in full party mode, Peter, put your pants back on.
Peter, yeah, really. Come on. It's a little early for that.
Come on, guys.
Thank you, Ike.
Yeah, real quick, listen, people need to remember something. The reason this all took place in the first place is because the insurance companies were totally out of hand, and I still think that they are. They were basically abusing people, taking money and not spending it on health care premiums like they were supposed to, and providing health care. And also, too, the Republicans should be all for it, considering they're the ones that started this thing in the first place. And, you need to teach your children that just like car insurance, you need health insurance.
That's right.
And it needs to become a regular thing. But I'll tell you what, I want to go to the next step. Let's take this victory and move on, and let's get universal health care and get this mess all over with.
All right. Yeah, no, I agree. Listen, you got to start by building on Obamacare. It's a starter home, and you build on up. And you got to take on those insurers, make sure they're regulated in the sense that they can't raise premiums to astronomical levels, and you got to break up the monopoly power in healthcare when it comes to hospitals. They're the ones in many markets jacking up healthcare prices. Carl in Chicago, Illinois. Carl, welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you? Thanks. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Very happy. Very, very, very. I'm very happy.
Yeah, extremely.
I don't know if you've noticed. I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you pointed out the fact that the Republicans were actually afraid that they were going to succeed in what they were doing, because they've indoctrinated the people that follow them, and they have the abortion thing in their back pocket. They got that. That's one of their battle cries for re-election. And then they also have the anti-gay crowd, and they've indoctrinated people on that, so they have that in their back pocket. And if they would have succeeded in this thing, they would have lost their third flag, their battle cry, down with Obamacare. We've got to defeat Obamacare, and they basically have that in their back pocket, so they can charge forward. And when they say, well, what are we fighting for? Well, anti-abortion, anti-gay, and anti-Obamacare thing. And you're right, they were afraid that this was going to go away, because then they were going to say, well, boy, our causes are going to be kind of thin because we'd be trimmed down by one of the big ones that we've been touting for a long time.
That's right, Carl. Thank God the Supreme Court upheld the law, because what would Republicans run on in 2016?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. What would they say about health care if they had nothing to say? They had nothing substantive to say, these guys. Supreme Court saved Republicans. All right, Bill Press Show coming back at you with more Obamacare goodness right after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Officer, were you the one who arrested me? Gonna shake my hand? So I got invited to host a vigil called Carry the Names. And that's what they were doing, carrying the names of the people who were victims of deadly police force. Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Akai Gurley. I got a motion from Dragonfly from Stop Shopping Choir, and I started preaching. I preached up a storm as best I could, but about a minute and a half into my sermon, the place was flooded with police, Homeland Security, National Guard, state troopers, and I was pushed over and handcuffed so fast, down in the jail, down in the basement. Before you know it, I was out the door, put in prison overnight. The next morning, I'm in court. The same thing happens. I'm just rushed out of there. Then our lawyer, Wiley Steckler, gives me this iPhone. And there, in black and white, in the Gothamist, a popular paper, is this charge by Adam Lisberg, the MTA law enforcement spokesperson for this grand place.
His quote is that I, Reverend Billy, physically attacked a police officer. Unbelievable. The feeling of being robbed of my work and life and identity, just the fiction. I did not touch anybody. I did not look. I know how to do this. I'm trained in nonviolence. I did not do anything. It was right here. It was right here. It happened right here. I was simply arrested while I was speaking and taken away, and that's it. The cold feeling in my city, the city that I love, that city spokespersons whose salary I pay for with my taxes, that they would say this. I can just feel the rending apart of the community, that we are not that close. We're not. They are willing to say this, and they think that they can just say anything about anybody and get away with it. So we have something in the Church of Stop Shopping called radical forgiveness. Amen?
Cops and bankers love their children.
I forgive the police.
We gotta love them too. Cops and bankers love their mothers.
But I'll stay radical.
Mothers love their brothers. We gotta love them too.
But we'll wake up every morning forgiving each other, reaching out, touching, telling stories, having humor, being in a community together, sharing our children, sharing the streets, sharing the climate, being in the city together. But forgiving each other, being grateful to each other, helping each other out, living together, living together.
I got a daughter just turned 4. What do we do in the superstore? What do we do with the blood and the gore? The water's rising through our door. Love our children too. Love our children too.
Amen. Earth-alleluia.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
The most valuable morning radio show, according to The Nation magazine. This is The Bill Press Show.
All right, 33 minutes after the hour, Igor Volsky here, sitting in for Bill Press and taking your calls on yesterday's historic Obamacare ruling. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. If you want to be part of the conversation. Ricky from Douglasville, Georgia, welcome to the program.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, Ricky.
You know, I got an agreement, a disagreement, and a comment.
All right.
The disagreement is, as far as Republicans, they have a better statement is that they can't come together. Tom Price of Georgia had House Bill 3400, I think it was, that he put out. Of course, they were the minority then, and as they play that game up there, whoever the minority party is, their stuff don't get. That's the way both sides play that game.
All right, yeah, he has a plan. He has a plan. I agree. He has a plan very similar to what John Boehner proposed back in 2009. You know how many people it covers, Ricky? 3 million. 3 million people.
I understand that, but the point is, it says they don't have a plan. They have a plan. Well, nobody's going to like their plan, of course, but they have a plan.
All right.
The comment is that I disagree as far as Republicans are concerned, what they're doing. This is going to implode on its own. It's bad legislation. It really is. It's going to implode on its own. When the employers come in next year in 16, that's when you need to get your bag of popcorn because it's going to be fun. Because whether you like it or dislike it, call them selfish folks, whatever. You can't tell me as a business, okay, that I'm going to suffer, I'm going to hurt my profit line by buying this insurance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you it's cheaper for me to pay the penalty. You take care of them. They're going to push them out on the exchanges. And, I mean, the bill's got 7 taxes in it. Now, I agree with you. Obamacare ain't going nowhere. But it's going to be an albatross around our throats just like Social Security and Medicare.
All right, Ricky, I'll tell you what. Do me a favor. 2016 comes around. That employee responsibility provision comes into play. You call back in, and we'll have this discussion again. And I bet you'll be wrong, but we'll see. We'll see where things land. Carl from Pleasantville, Ohio. Carl, welcome to the program.
Hi. Hey, I think it's this Obamacare is Republican health insurance, and they don't want to do away with it. They just don't want the single payer. And one other comment is these gun control laws. That's terrible. But Ronald Reagan closed all the.
All right, Carl, look, I think that Ronald Reagan is actually one of those guys who we can thank for a part of Obamacare, because few people know that Ronald Reagan signed legislation that reformed Medicare and Medicaid in a way that allows those two very large public insurers to set prices, which is, of course, what Republicans complain about all the time, the government setting prices and it not being a competitive market. But that's just one of the reforms that has allowed healthcare costs in those two very large insurers to stay reasonable, and then the private insurance industry kind of followed suit. So yes, we can thank Ronald Reagan, we can thank Mitt Romney for sure. Reagan care, Romney care, apparently that's what the Supreme Court found constitutional yesterday. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377 if you want to be part of our celebration, of our conversation about the Affordable Care Act. And I think that, certainly when you prepare for these kinds of events, if you're a lawmaker and your staff writes up different kinds of statements, right? So you'd write up a statement if you win, if it goes your way, so you have something to hand to the press, so you make it into all the stories. If you lose, you write up a statement for that. And then decision day, you kind of, you give the right statement, you send it out to your press list. Well, I was just thinking that if I'm a Republican staffer here writing a statement for John Boehner or whomever, that all I really had, this was really easy for me, all I really had to do was copy and paste everything I've been saying since 2010, like what I said after the 2012 decision, just change the date on it, and there we go. Mm-hmm. And then I'm done. And that's what I say. I say it sucks. I say it's going to implode, and that ultimately I'm gonna repeal the thing. But as I tweeted yesterday after the decision, in my glee, that Albert Einstein really said it best, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and hoping for different results. And that's what we see. That's the rhetoric that we're going to hear. Because if you'll recall, 2010 was going to be a huge referendum on Obamacare. The election on Obamacare. 2012 was going to be the election on Obamacare. And Americans have a choice of either going the Obamacare route, as Romney used to say, or going towards freedom, or driving towards freedom. 2014 was another huge referendum on Obamacare. And now 2016 is apparently going to be another referendum on Obamacare, and I wonder how this one is going to turn out. Raul from
I love you are taking such a victory lap, and it's welcomed. It's deserved.
I've actually, listeners don't know, I've actually been running around the studio during the break
running
to get
laps.
So you just put your sweatband on, Igor. It's getting real in here.
Yeah.
Raul from Corpus Christi, Texas. Welcome to the program.
Hi, I like your program, and I love your free speech TV expresses your thoughts, and I really like it. And I want to express the reason why Republicans did not repeal Obamacare is because I believe that if they repeal Obamacare, then Obama won't pass the TPP, which most of the Koch brothers like to lobby for Republicans to pass. You know what I mean? So that way they could send the jobs out, pay minimum wage, like $1 to Vietnamese, and they make a lot of money, and then Obamacare is a private sector of a government, you know what I mean, like Medicare.
Yeah, Raul,
I support
you make a good point, and it's something the AP pointed out this morning. The headline here, Peter: "Conservatives to the rescue. Obama's healthcare trade wins." And of course, a Republican court, well, not a conservative-leaning court, a Republican-appointed Chief Justice, John Roberts, for the second time saves Obamacare. And, of course, Republicans carrying the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, fast-track authority to the finish line for this president. It's ironic that Obama, being one of the most hated presidents on the right side of the aisle in history, is in his second term being aided by Republicans, by conservatives.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And you think about, like, what could... This is always the argument, right, about why I don't vote. I don't vote because it doesn't matter anymore. This is why you vote. The Supreme Court. That's the number one argument that Bill always brings up. You don't want to vote? Think about what could happen to the Supreme Court. But in this case, it's really interesting that, as you said, the guy who's been saving Obamacare was a hero to the right wing. It was George Bush's pick after, of course, Harriet Miers. Remember that whole debacle?
That's right.
But, yeah, I mean, John Roberts is liberal hero, John Roberts.
Liberal hero.
Welcome him.
When, of course, Republicans, Bush appointed him as Chief Justice after Rehnquist passed away, he was praised by everyone, including Jeb Bush, who, of course, said very good things about him and now thinks that such a mistake was made. Such a mistake. Carla from Glendale, Arizona. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Igor. I wanted to mention that, along with our Supreme Court's hand to Obama, that on the health care, that Loretta Lynch has also conducted the largest takedown of fraudulent healthcare providers, doctors in the history of healthcare, ranging over the course of about 9 states, 243 people, saving the taxpayers well into the hundreds of millions of dollars, if I recall that article on HuffPost.
Yeah, that's a great point, Carla. Republicans and every lawmaker you can find love to talk about eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse. And here, the Attorney General is actually doing it. This administration's actually doing it. And you know what? They don't get any credit for it, really, at all. But absolutely. And in fact, the law has tools in it to root out that waste, fraud, and abuse. And even though I think, look, it's something lawmakers always go to in terms of, well, how are you going to lower healthcare costs? Well, I'm going to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. It's really, I mean, it's a lot of money. It's, as Carla said, hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not going to make a dent in the larger picture of healthcare costs, but the fact that we're getting there slowly is very good news. Mary from Durham, Colorado. I think I said that wrong. Ouray, Colorado. Mary, wherever you're from, welcome to the program.
Hi. It's Ouray, Colorado. I was just wondering, I love Bernie Sanders, and I was wondering his promotion then of the single payer, where does this leave that particular thing with the success here with the Obamacare? Will he continue to press for this? I told your gentleman there that I don't understand the intricacies of all this stuff, but where does that put Bernie in the relative thing with the Obamacare versus single payer?
Yeah, I don't think Jamie's a gentleman, but I'll answer the question. Let's keep it real. Answer the question. Well, I think Bernie's certainly going to continue pushing for single payer. The good news is that in Obamacare, there's a provision that allows states to experiment with different models of healthcare delivery, and single payer is one option states can take. In his home state of Vermont, they were trying to set up a single payer system. They kind of fumbled a little bit, but certainly moving forward, if states feel like single payer is something they can accomplish. And it's difficult in the sense that it really you have to dig into the current system and pull out a lot of the plans of insurers and doctors and the established payment systems and completely kind of replant in a way. So it's challenging. But in small states like Vermont, you can maybe do it if you do it right. And the hope certainly is for Bernie Sanders, for a lot of progressives out there, is that if it works in one state and it works well, and other states then kind of take notice, then maybe it can spread throughout the nation. But I think it's going to be a slow process no matter who's president. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. You're listening to The Bill Press Show with Igor Volsky of Think Progress. We'll be right back.
This is The Bill Press Show.
When I started learning about nutrition, about which, by the way, much less is known than you might think, I learned that what mattered most about one's health was not necessarily the nutrients, good or bad, that you were consuming or staying away from, or even the calorie counts. But what predicted a healthy diet more than anything else is the fact that it was being cooked by a human being and not a corporation. Corporations cook very differently than people do. They use vast amounts of salt, fat, and sugar, much more than you would ever use in your own cooking. And the reason they do that is those are three incredibly attractive and incredibly cheap ingredients. And when they're layered properly, as in a chip or pastries and forms of junk food, they're incredibly addictive. They really press our buttons. They activate our dopamine network, our cravings. And in fact, people in the industry, they don't talk about addiction in the food industry, even though they traffic in addiction. They talk about craveability. It's the same thing. And snackability is another term they use. It's a lovely word. And then the last point about corporate cooking that's important to understand is they cook different stuff than you do at home. What they're good at, in general, they don't cook that well, but things like chips, they cook incredibly well. And here's a classic food that if you make it yourself, if you've ever made French fries, you have to wash the potatoes, you have to peel the potatoes, you have to slice the potatoes, you have to fry them in a lot of oil, you have to spatter your entire stovetop, you have to clean up, and then you have this pot of oil you have to get rid of. I mean, it's really difficult, and it's a pain. They're wonderful, but it's a pain. And if you make them yourself, you'll only eat them every 6 weeks, 2 months, because it's too much work. But when you let corporations cook for you, it's so simple and so inexpensive, and they're really good, that you will have them twice a day, as many people in America do. So you see the kinds of foods you end up with are these labor-intensive foods and desserts. These special occasion foods become everyday foods when we let industry cook for us. Eat anything you want, just cook it yourself.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
All right, 48 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show continues for this Friday, June 26th, 2015. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, filling in for Bill Press. We're going to pause the Obamacare party for just a moment because it's just getting too much, and talk about the other big victory that Republicans or conservatives handed to President Obama, and that, of course, is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the president's trade deal that Democrats initially blocked. But now, of course, authority is there, and the president is going to try to hammer this thing home. Joining me now is Washington editor for The Nation, George Zornick. George, welcome.
Hey, Igor.
Hey, look, I had been watching this from afar, and when the trade deal initially failed, I thought, all right, well, it looks like a big loss for the president. They're going to have to make some real concessions to get this through. And then next thing I know, I turn around and the thing's on the president's desk waiting to be signed. What happened?
It was kind of a lot of legislative jiu-jitsu, I guess would be the best way to put it. It was splitting up the bill and re-voting on the bill and working on it, basically until they could get it through. I think part of the strategy was to keep some of the opposition to the bill sort of off guard and keeping the focus point, shifting it every day. I mean, it was very hard to pay attention to, what vote was happening when and what did you need to oppose.
Well, you're making me feel better, so I'm not the only one who was confused. Initially, the Democrats decided to vote down the trade assistance for displaced workers of trade deals, something they've long supported, but they didn't have the votes to vote down the authority itself, the fast track authority, so they targeted the assistance successfully. As you point out, later that was broken apart. It passed through all this jiu-jitsu and confusion, but Democrats, progressive Democrats who've kind of fought for better trade deals their entire careers are saying, no, this fight isn't over. Is there anything they can do now, George, given that the president has this authority to improve the final agreement?
Yeah, I think a lot of the talk has been, now that fast track is in place, then TPP is a sure thing. I don't think that's totally true. Certainly it makes it easier, and as you know, it lowers the vote requirement in the Senate from 60 to 50. But, the battle was sort of always going to be in the House. The Senate, a Republican majority, a lot of pro-trade Democrats. In the House, fast track only passed by 2 votes. And you have to consider that in the fall, late fall, when TPP comes up, they're going to need, again, probably that slim 2 to 3 vote margin. You're going to be much closer to election time, so there's going to be a lot more pressure, not only on Democrats from their base to oppose it, but you're going to have Republicans where their presumably more conservative primary challenger is going to be out in the districts just looking to hammer them for anything that, voting for anything that Obama wants. That's sort of page 1 of the conservative insurgent playbook is, does your opponent support something that Obama also supports? And if so, hammer them for it. So it's going to be, it's going to be very, very close. I think it's again going to come down to a few votes. Once again, do I think like the big money and the corporations that want the trade deal, do they prevail? Probably, but I wouldn't say that it's over.
But very quickly, George, in terms of actually improving some of the environmental labor provisions, making sure those countries actually implement some of those changes we're asking for, can that be required now?
No, it's that ship has sailed. I mean, fast track was sort of the chance to do that. The negotiating objectives, according to many Democrats, are pretty weak. And now that that's in place, I mean, Obama has already basically negotiated the TPP. The ink is basically drying on a few different chapters. And that's it. I mean, it's going to come to Congress soon, and they'll have to either vote it up or down. But that's it. There's no amendments. All
right. George Zornick, Washington editor for The Nation. On the ship, leaving the dock, not coming back. TPP coming your way, America, and will be also coming your way on the other side of the hour here on the Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Before now, it's been difficult for criminals like us to know which states have loose gun laws. How would a criminal like me know which states permit me to carry loaded guns in their amusement parks, golf courses, or beaches?
I have some violent friends. We all wear leather jackets and scream at women. And we want to find out which states we can buy and sell guns easily.
CrimAdvisor.com. That's the site to find out where it's easiest for felons and fugitives to buy, carry, and even traffic guns.
That's why I love Arizona, where I can go see the beautiful Grand Canyon and carry a loaded gun without even having to get a background check.
You would fail that background check.
I'm sure of it. Now, what about a road trip? What states can I go to fill my trunk with guns and take it back home for my even more dangerous friends?
CrimAdvisor has a list for that.
That's so unreasonable.
Our traffickers' top 10.
Nevada. What happens in Vegas may have to stay in Vegas, but your guns don't. Bring them over to California and sell them.
The market up there is hungry for guns.
I understand that CrimAdvisor.com will tell me which states really cater to us criminals and creeps, but what about the states where we're not so welcome? The ones that don't get us?
I don't even like saying the name of these states. But California, Connecticut, Maryland, and New York all have laws to keep guns out of the hands of people like us.
I want to shoot California so bad.
Boo, California!
Boo, go home. Wow. CrimAdvisor.com has all this information?
Sure does.
CrimAdvisor.com. Plan your perfect getaway. Oh, like TripAdvisor.
Oh.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Seen on Free Speech TV and online on TawkrTV. This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 57 minutes after the hour, the Bill Press Show continues as we are following a breaking news story out of France, a possible terror attack with one person dead. Peter, what's the latest?
So the president of France, Francois Hollande, just spoke. He said, quote, "This was a terrorist attack." They are calling it a terrorist attack. He confirmed there are one or two assailants that were involved in this. There's been one arrest made as of now. We're not sure exactly what that is. We'll keep you posted on that as we go through the show. The president of France is in Brussels right now, says that he's leaving immediately to go to Paris to sort all this out. So, again, it's a fluid situation. It happened just before he went on air this morning. So we're keeping an eye on it, and we'll bring you everything as we get it. One dead, two wounded. This is at a gas factory. The suspect has been identified. But again, the president came right out today and said this was a terrorist attack. So that's how they're proceeding.
All right, we're going to keep our eyes on that developing story. But next, we're going to go to Charleston, South Carolina for the funeral of Senator Pinckney and the others who died last week in the Charleston massacre. The Bill Press Show. I'm Igor Volsky. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
I'm a Pistons fan. Their slogan was, "We come to work." That's what Detroit about. That's why they used it. It's a team thing. They won 2 championships, a team. There was no star. No mayor can come in here and be a star. It's a team thing. No governors can come here and think you can do it by yourself. It's a team thing. You got communities. They got ideas, too. The only thing wrong with Detroit, people had lost hope here. Residents, city workers, so much corruption. They lose hope. But I grew up here. I love this city. I think it can come back. I've been working for the city 24 and a half years. Within the last 10 years, we took 4 pay cuts and then an additional 10% wage cut. I've lost a home.
When you take all of the decisions out of the city of Detroit, all of us, then what do you have? Exactly what we got. A lot of problems. every time the city seems to fall into a problem, it's always on the backs of us workers.
You wake up out of a dead sleep and you jump behind the wheel and take off driving and try to get everybody there safe, not knowing really what you're pulling up to. I'm not eligible for Social Security, so the pension is my sole salary at this point.
We've been in business here 39 years. We've seen a lot of changes in Detroit. The area was a lot of industry, a lot of city workers. It's getting very tough for the city workers. It's getting tough for us as a business people.
Response times are increasing because of the closing of companies, which takes your insurance rate through the roof. So all the things that affect us affect the citizens.
I worked for the city in different capacities for 29 years. I feel like an old jacket. They use me up and they throw me away. In my condition, nobody's gonna hire me. I'm 68 years old. Half the times, I can't get my blood pressure medicine. It's either feeding myself, blood pressure, or paying bills.
$754. By the time they take all the deductions for I have my car insurance, my house insurance, and my health insurance taken out. So the time they take all that, I'll get about $300 after they take all that out. I don't understand it. I can't see how the governor is allowing this to happen and what they're doing and they want to blame it all on the seniors. Not only the seniors, but the city workers. And we worked hard. I know I worked hard.
I've been in Detroit since 1946. I was 14 years old when I came in. I don't live large at all. I wish I could. I don't know when the last time I've been shopping. I only get $1,100, and I'm 81 years old. And I need every penny that I can get and that I do get. And I'm very, very upset about the idea of them taking away my pensions that I worked 30 years for. I think it's terrible that they talk about Detroit like they do, because Detroit has been very good to me.
I have a lot of city workers coming in with their uniforms on, Detroit Water Department, Police Department, Fire Department. I get a lot of people, the Border Patrol come in. So if I lose that customer base, I'm going to be in a position where I might have to close down. If they take away their pensions, if they start cutting jobs, it's going to cut into a large percentage of not only our business, but other businesses that are in the city of Detroit. We're here. We've been here for 26 years. We're still trying to do business in the city.
Detroiters are survivors. They tough. They adapt. But only can do so much when your politicians ahead of you and we're not on the same team. We're not going to let Detroit be erased, bulldozed, or whatever. We're going to fight to the bitter end. Detroit going to survive.
I have run these canyons for 6 million years. I have traveled from the Rocky Mountains to the deserts, through scorching heat and freezing cold, from the land of the dinosaurs to fields of food.
I lend my hand to 7 states, 2 countries, 9 national parks,
and 36 million people across an arid West.
I am not the strongest or the largest, but I am the hardest working. people love me. My playfulness.
My beauty.
My power.
My life. But I don't think I can offer any more.
I am tired.
I am tired.
Tapped.
And tied. Of the hundreds of major rivers in the world, I am one of the few who
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
The president making his way down to Charleston, South Carolina this morning for the funeral of Senator Pinckney and the others who died in the tragic massacre last week at Mother Emanuel AME Church. Good morning. My name is Igor Volsky, filling in for Bill Press on this Friday, June 26th, 2015, joined here in the studio by Peter Ogburn, Lisa Murphy,
Hey, Igor.
Jamie Benson, and Cyprian Bolding. We're running our video cameras at youtube.com/TawkrTV. We're also, of course, on the iHeartRadio app, on the TuneIn app, and on your favorite progressive radio station. But joining us now on the phone is Metro columnist for the Post and Courier in Charleston, South Carolina, Brian Hicks. Brian, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me on.
I just came back from Charleston this weekend, and I got to commend you. The Post and Courier is a wonderful paper. I was reading it my whole time down there, and some really strong coverage of the events of the last week. I want to ask you about all of this action, all of this energy that we've seen in the aftermath of the tragedy to pull down the flag from the Capitol grounds there in Columbia, South Carolina, and the kind of remarkable, I would say, response from conservative Republican leaders, led, of course, by the governor, Nikki Haley. Has it surprised you, given all your coverage of this issue over the years, and how contentious it has been, and how long civil rights groups and others have tried to get this thing down, that now, a week later, it's becoming potentially a reality?
Well, I've got to tell you, I was very surprised. In fact, my astute political observation of this was, don't even bother asking, it's not coming down. Just out of 20 years of experience of dealing with this. And so I am amazed that we are this close to bringing the flag down. And I'll tell you what's done it. I mean, this was such a horrific crime, and everyone was shocked by it here. I know that our governor, who has in the past supported the flag, even kind of choked up at a press conference talking about this, and it was very good theater. But everybody, last week I wrote a column saying, of course, this was racial. And people were saying, you don't know that, you don't know that. And a day later, this picture surfaces with him with the Confederate flag and all of this stuff in his manifesto. And something just broke. And I think the day after it did, we still had some politicians saying this has nothing to do with race.
Yeah, and let's figure out exactly what happened. I was there on Saturday. I called the Democratic Party of South Carolina, and I asked them if I could talk to a party member who supports pulling down the flag. They referred me to Senator Brad Hutto, And when I interviewed him about this issue, he was very, very non-committal, saying that while he supported pulling down the flag, that it's just one in the host of issues that the South Carolina Assembly will be discussing when they reconvene in January, that he wants to tackle mental health and guns and all of these other concerns, and that the flag, while he supports bringing it down, of course, represents heritage to a lot of people in history, and was very careful in the way he cushioned it. And I suspect, Brian, that if I spoke to him today about this very issue, he would be a lot more forceful about pulling that thing down. Can you take me inside that really amazing shift? I mean, who did Governor Haley talk to? What kind of conversations did she have? What did the community leaders there on the ground do to really kind of bring this thing around? Because in my experience, in the final days, the momentum wasn't that great. The flag rally in Columbia on Saturday night wasn't that big. So how is it that here we are really talking about this as a real possibility?
Well, the word around the state is that the governor's office got a call from some of our biggest employers, Boeing, BMW, Volvo, folks like that. And the other thing is that Republican presidential candidates are getting really sick of being asked about their position on the flag. And I heard that a few of them called and asked the governor to please do something so they would quit being asked about this. I think that had a lot to do with it.
Do you feel like this was a personal issue for her, or did she not care about the flag? She's an Indian American, certainly faced a lot of race issues when she was growing up in South Carolina. The flag, I don't think, represents her heritage or her history. Is this a decision she made that maybe her personal experience or personal story contributed to her call to tear it down?
I don't know that that's true. I think that the governor is like a lot of sort of Chamber of Commerce Republicans in this state and didn't care one way or another, but avoided touching it, sort of like if you see a poisonous snake, you step out of the way. In 1998, Governor David Beasley called for taking the flag off of the dome, and that year he was defeated for re-election by Jim Hodges, a Democrat. And a lot of people, attributed that to Beasley's support for moving the flag off the dome. And I personally think that Beasley had moderated himself on enough issues that he turned off conservative voters, and Hodges was offering a state lottery. I think that's what did it, really. But the flag has always had this mythical power in this state, and most politicians have avoided it like the plague.
Hey, Brian, this is Peter. I want to ask you a question. I'm a native Charlestonian. I grew up there, and I was there during that whole David Beasley, Jim Hodges debate and whether or not the flag should be taken off of the top of the State House. And I knew a lot of people that would either have the bumper sticker or wear the shirt or have the comments of, it's heritage, not hate. Heritage, not hate. I mean, that was burned. It's burned into my memory. So we've talked a little bit about the politicians and where they are. What about the people in South Carolina? Because some of the recent polling shows that it's still, among white South Carolinians anyway, a majority of people didn't have a problem with the flag being on the Capitol grounds. What about now? Have we seen that change?
I heard about a poll taken earlier this week where it was still like 49-49. I mean, it's just really evenly split.
All right, we're joined by Metro columnist for the Post and Courier in Charleston, South Carolina, Brian Hicks. By the way, if you want to be part of the conversation, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. Brian, what are the mechanics now in terms of getting it down? They had a special session on Tuesday, I believe. What's the process for actually getting this thing done?
Well, when they moved the flag, when they took it off the dome and put it at the Soldiers Monument on State House grounds, they passed what they called the Heritage Act, which meant that nobody could move or take down any flag or monument, in historical context without a two-thirds votes of the legislature. So there are some people who say that you're going to have to get two-thirds of the House and two-thirds of the Senate to take this flag down. A lot of other lawmakers will tell you that that's baloney because one legislature cannot bind a future legislature on what it does. So other people think that a simple bill that passes with a simple majority, is all they need. And I keep hearing that debated back and forth between these guys. But I think they will be taking it up this coming week.
Taking it up this coming week. Certainly all of the press coverage really signals that there's growing support for tearing it down. When I was down there, I couldn't find a single supporter of keeping the flag up to go on record, on camera with me, to discuss why they still want to see this thing flying near the Capitol. Where do you think the votes are? Because there are have to be at least a dozen holdouts who haven't changed their minds in the aftermath of the shooting. But are those minds slowly changing? Are people doing whip counts to see if this is an actual possibility?
Well, the Post and Courier has been doing a live tally of votes. And I think last time I looked at it, I think the Senate had two-thirds support for it. The House was close, but not quite at two-thirds. I mean, there's strong support. There are some people who are never going to go there, but I think they've got close to the votes. The problem now is going to be if someone in the Senate tries to filibuster it, or if someone in the House tries to slap a bunch of amendments on it. There's one guy who said that he will put 500 amendments on this to bog it down and stop it. I got a feeling that those people will be put in line pretty quickly because I think it's the legislature's intention to get rid of this fast.
Yeah, I mean the fact that Nikki Haley was up there with the head of the GOP, Reince Priebus was there. Jim Clyburn was there, right? It was a real showing of power of South Carolina politics that was there with her when she made that announcement. I think it's a fairly unified movement. And you mentioned the tally that you all have. I can't say this enough. PostandCourier.com. Post and Courier is doing phenomenal work here recently, not just with the Confederate flag issue, but way above and beyond that. You guys are crushing it.
What is, if you had to put a probability on what the chances are of getting rid of this flag, given your experience, your years of work on this issue, what would you put it at?
I guess I would cautiously say I'm at 60% right now.
60% coming down.
That's just off the top of my head because I have been around this legislature for nearly 20 years, and it looks very promising right now, and I think the will is there, but you never, ever give up on the ability of one podunk member of screwing up the whole
thing. Yeah, that sounds about right.
And the other, just very quickly, the other thing that I heard, the other concern I heard from the Senator, Brad Huma, who I spoke to, is he seemed to suggest that when they come into full term in January, that they'll take up mental health, they'll take up some kind of gun safety reforms, which surprised me personally. Is that something that Democrats are going to be pushing in the state in the wake of the shooting?
I think it is. I think the Democrats are always focused on gun issues. The mental health issue, not so much. It came up. We had a woman pull a gun at Ashley Hall, which is a private girls' school in downtown Charleston, a couple of years ago. And they actually passed some sort of law with some minor restrictions on people with mental illness purchasing guns, and that was amazing that they got that through. But the Democrats are always focusing on issues like that, which is just it's charming. It's so foolishly optimistic because they can't do anything in this state. It's so Republican controlled, but they still try. I would not be surprised to see the Republicans also jump on the mental illness bandwagon. That's been a popular popular refrain down here.
They jumped on that pretty quickly.
Well, they wanted to do that and deny it was racial at first. But I do think that they might sacrifice the flag on the altar of politics, but they're not going to sacrifice gun rights.
Brian Hicks, telling it like it is, Metro columnist for the Post and Courier. Mr. Hicks, thank you so much for joining us, giving us the local perspective of, is it possible? Are we going to see the flag come down? Are we going to see other reforms in South Carolina? Time will tell. The Bill Press Show, 20 minutes after the hour. We'll be back. Stay with us.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Just this month, my bill was like $138.
Even at one phone call a week cost me $40 to $50 every month.
I am living on a fixed income of SSI, so this is really a great hardship. Families are being punished. When they incarcerate your children, they incarcerate the whole family.
In 2011, the Media Action Grassroots Network, Working Narratives, and Prison Legal News founded the Campaign for Prison Phone Justice, an effort to call on the FCC to address the cost of interstate phone calls. The campaign mobilized prisoners to send hundreds of letters. Advocates and families filled out postcards, met with elected officials, and signed petitions. Partnerships were formed across the political spectrum and with groups in the criminal justice, civil rights, and public interest community. The film distribution company Participant Media and director Ava DuVernay joined the fight through a social action campaign tied to the release of the feature film Middle of Nowhere. In an effort to push the FCC to act, the campaign hosted a historic rally outside of the Federal Communications Commission where for the first time, families of prisoners, elected officials, civil rights and faith leaders came together to call for an end to predatory phone rates.
We're all held captive when predatory phone companies gouge our families.
My son has been incarcerated now for over 10 years, and my husband estimates that in the time we spent over $25,000 on prison phone calls.
My hero's not yours, you probably arrested them. Your schools probably neglected them. They spawn thoughts, you probably infected them. Feed us what you feed us, you can lay us next to them. FBI call it major crimes. Babies making babies cry.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 25 minutes after the hour, Igor Volsky, that's me from Think Progress.
Hi, Igor.
Sitting in for Bill Press. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. If you want to be part of our conversation about the events in Charleston, the funeral today for Senator Pinckney, President Obama making his way down to South Carolina to eulogize the late senator.
I realize that the circumstances are awful, but I can't wait to see what the president will have to say at this. Obviously, it's a speech you wish he didn't have to make, but it's going to be a real moment for the president. I don't think he's going to make a lot of it about, gun control or anything like that, but he is so effective when he does these eulogies. You remember the Fort Hood shooting? Mm-hmm. He had a personal story for every single person. I think that the president's going to have a similar situation in Charleston. And it's such a powerful moment to have him speak to this, one of the grossest racially motivated attacks we've ever seen in this country, to have our black president speak on that. I hate to say I can't wait to see it, but it's going to be fascinating to see how the president handles it.
It's the kind of speech he's had to give way too many times in his presidency, and he knew Senator Pinckney personally, or at least had met him in the past, and so, he should have some real personal anecdotes. I was down in South Carolina this past weekend, and I wanted to find out what was going on in the community there, because nothing comes out of nothing. This shooter had to have some kind of reference point to do what he did, and we spoke to Pastor Dixon, who was really able to connect all of the racial problems that have been going on in our country to what happened in that church, in Mother Emanuel Church. And he said a lot of that hate, a lot of that racism that motivated the shooter in Charleston really began with the election of the president. I want to play a clip of the video that we made from that conversation.
President Obama's first election, the hatred that surfaced, that was under the cover, in the closet prior to that time, it came out more and more, and it even developed into an alternate party system in America called the Tea Party, and manifested itself through every aspect of life. The Pandora's box was open, and out of that box came hatred, racial hatred, the ignorance, the worst side of human beings. Things were spread across the nation, such as our country is being taken over by black people.
Yeah, the shooter was 21 years old. President Obama has been in office for 7 years. He was 14 when Obama was elected, and he's been hearing these kinds of messages over and over again. We'll be back after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
This is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
I cursor in between the R and the E. Pressing dot, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
The most valuable morning radio show, according to The Nation magazine. This is The Bill Press Show.
All right, 33 minutes after the hour, the Bill Press Show for this Friday, June 26th, 2015. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, sitting in for Bill Press. We've talked about Obamacare, we've talked about Charleston, and now we're going to ask, what does this mean for the 2016 election? Because as we get closer and closer and closer to November, everything is going to be seen, of course, through that prism. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377 if you want to be part of the conversation. Joining us in studio now is Steve Shepard. He's campaign and elections editor for Politico. Steve, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
So I want to start, of course, with the big opportunity Republicans had last week to recognize what happened in Charleston, to recognize what motivated the events in Charleston, and to properly rally around what everyone is now discussing, and that's, of course, taking down the Confederate flag from the grounds of the South Carolina Capitol. But that's not what the 13 or 14 Republicans running for president did, it seemed to me like they really missed an opportunity to lead and to talk to a larger swath of Americans than just the Republican base. Is that your read?
It certainly took a little while. You know, the initial reactions concerning the flag weren't necessarily what ended up happening earlier this week, when Republican leaders sort of got their act together and did check the box in a sense. You saw it wasn't just Nikki Haley. It was statements from Republicans everywhere. Reince Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, was in Columbia with Nikki Haley to make that announcement. It was obviously an organized party effort after a few days where I think party leaders and consultants and the folks who are engineered with trying to take back the White House in 2016 looked around at how the candidates had been responding and said, we're kind of missing the mark here. This is what we need to do. The problem is that Republicans have got, not on this specific issue, but have got this idea right before initially. If you go back, for example, and look at the post-2012 RNC autopsy, what went wrong for the party, what the party needs to do in order to make sure it's in good standing in 2016 to take another shot at the White House. There are a lot of things that the party was all behind together. Initially, one of the things in there is immigration reform. Yeah. The problem is, and it's been 5 days now, it's way too early, but these things tend to fall apart when it comes down to trying to sell some of these things to conservative voters in the party. That's what happened with immigration. Remains to be seen. Every Republican is going to be going down, not yet because it's too soon, but they have to go down to South Carolina because that's where the voters are. I mean, that is a huge primary. Everyone talks about Iowa, New Hampshire, but South Carolina has the mix of the evangelical voters in Iowa and the establishment voters in New Hampshire. In a lot of ways, it's the biggest test of the early states. It's the largest of the early states. That is a huge, huge prize. And when they go down there, September, October, November, December, how are they going to be dealing with this issue? Where are Republican primary voters in South Carolina? Where are they going to be on the issue of the Confederate flag? And how are the candidates going to react to that? That's a huge unanswered question. I think you're absolutely right. I think the party got off to a slow start. I think what they've done this week has been helpful. Does it negate the slow start? I don't know about that. Where are we in 4 months? That I have no idea, and that's going to be really interesting to watch. Yeah. When you're Rick Perry, when Jeb Bush, when Rand Paul, when these guys go down to South Carolina to campaign again, and understandably things are on hold, and they should be, but when they start to do that and voters start to react to what's going on, the state legislature is going to debate this after the 4th. Once this whole debate forms, where the candidates are and how they splinter is going to be super interesting to watch.
That's a key point, because the reason why they had such a slow response, I think, initially, and the reason why I think they're going to be careful when they do travel to South Carolina to campaign there is maintaining that balance between, yes, appealing to the larger tent that the autopsy talked about, but also maintaining that concentration of older white support that they need to vote for them in the primary, and how that they strike that balance and what value they set to each group, I think is going to be very, very telling in terms of how they advance, how their campaign is seen, and certainly how they're viewed more broadly in the general election.
And I would be shocked if they are as monolithic as they are now.
Yes.
I think different candidates appeal to different segments of the Republican primary electorate in South Carolina and nationally, and they're going to look and say, I need this segment, and this is where I'm going to be on this issue. And other ones are going to say, no, you know what, I need this other segment, and this is where I'm going to be on the issue. So where the candidates end up breaking out in the fall is a lot more interesting to me than necessarily where they are now.
All right, Steve Shepard from Politico, let's make some predictions. Who do you think is the one Republican out of the 14 who are almost in this race who you think is most able to take a strong position on this issue, break from the party as it stands today, and call for the flag to come down talk about race in some way that sounds genuine. I mean, who is it? Is it Chris Christie?
It's probably not Chris Christie in talking about race. Chris Christie's style, it requires such a nuance. Well,
what are you saying about Chris Christie?
He's a blunt guy, and this is going to be, if he is going to make any inroads in the Republican primary, if he's going to even get in the Republican primary debates, he has to play to his strengths. His strengths are going to a town hall and standing up for what he believes in and making a strong, loud case for that. A discussion about race, a sober conversation about one of the most complex issues, in an issue that's very sensitive to a lot of people, isn't an area where you can, I don't want to use the word bully as a pejorative, but it's not an area where you can sort of just shout down your opponents. There are some economic issues, and Republican primary voters are going to respond to that, but it's going to be off-putting for him to be the candidate.
All right, fine,
on this.
not him. Okay, you've convinced me. What about Jeb? What about Jeb?
Jeb Bush has a chance. I think Marco Rubio has a chance. Rand Paul has made a big issue out of trying to appeal to black voters.
This should be his base.
This should be his moment.
Yeah.
And you did notice that this week he had one of the more eloquent statements on this and talked about how, while he respects the rights of states, and states' rights are a big issue for his supporters, this flag is inextricably linked. I'm paraphrasing, but inextricably linked to an era of racism and hatred and inhumanity, that it has to come down. The problem is you haven't really heard that from him. You've read it attributed to him. You've read it in a statement that his campaign has published. I think he has an opportunity to talk about this moving forward and make the case, whether through paid media or whether through earned media, to make the case where voters can see him and feel his sincerity. That's tough to feel off the page, but I think it's a big opportunity for him.
I guess one of the questions or one of the indicators that's going to set whether or not Republicans are going to address this in any serious way is how much the country is going to be paying attention to these issues once the cameras leave Charleston, South Carolina, once the funeral is over, and whether or not this is going to be a discussion that's more than about a flag, that focuses on some of the systemic racial problems that we face as a country in education, in healthcare, in voting. Hillary Clinton, I thought, really took a bite out of this in both her response to the tragedy, but also beforehand when she was trying to appeal to segments of the Democratic base and made that big speech on voting rights issues that appeal to African Americans, speaking to that audience. It seems to me like, as you point out, I mean, this is a huge opportunity for Republicans to say, and use this as an opening to broach some of these issues if they want to be successful in a general in 2016.
That's true. I think you asked how much people are going to be talking about this. I think if Reince Priebus has his way, what will happen is the state legislature will come back after the 4th of July. They'll pass these laws. The flag will come down. And then he hopes that people will forget about it. That the Republican Party wants to put this issue behind them right now. That's why they're doing what they're doing. Hillary Clinton has the biggest opportunity and the biggest role in trying to make these issues last through the fall into the actual meat of the campaign. She has the biggest platform. There really isn't, while she has challengers who are more progressive than her, they don't have the authority on this issue. They may have it on some economic populism issues, but they don't have the authority on this issue that she does. And she can convey that message better than anybody else. If she keeps it in the conversation, and we're talking about this in September and October and November among the Republican candidates, then that is, I think that's a good thing for Democrats.
So it's up to her in some ways to keep us in the headlines.
I do think so, yes.
All right, Steve Shepard, campaign and elections editor for Politico. We're going to come back and talk about the politics of Obamacare. You're listening to The Bill Press Show. Stay with us.
This is The Bill Press Show.
A few years ago, plastic bag waste in our city came to a tipping point. It was clear. We had a bag problem. My department was tasked to reduce plastic bag consumption. We needed to come up with ways to change human behavior. So we asked ourselves,
Would you like it back?
what do people really hate?
Yep.
Getting punched in the stomach. Preliminary studies showed that the consequences weren't severe enough to warrant behavioral change.
Actually, can I get that double bagged?
So we thought, what do people hate more than getting punched in the stomach? Kissing Helga.
Hey, big boy.
People didn't find her so offensive after all, so we had to get creative.
How many bags? Okay, now, pour this ice water down your pants.
We tried everything.
Eat this rat. Defuse this bomb.
Even fighting your clone. After blowing through millions of dollars of government funds on research, I came up with a brilliant idea.
Why don't we just charge 5 cents per bag?
That's a stupid idea.
Would you like it back?
Yes.
5 cents a bag.
5 cents? 5 cents? Do I still have the option of getting punched?
Honestly, I don't know how everyone else missed it.
Why don't you just get a reusable bag?
You wouldn't let money just blow out of your house. So when your AC or heater is on, make sure the doors, windows, and fireplace flue are shut tight. If you're headed out, turn down the AC or lower the heat by 10 degrees. And always keep your water heater set at 120. A little bit of common sense goes a long way. Get more great tips at energysaver.gov.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Show, Friday, June 26th, 2015. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, sitting in for Bill Press, and we continue with Steve Shepard, campaign and elections editor for Politico, talking all things 2016. A lot of talk yesterday, Steve, after the Supreme Court unexpectedly handed down their Obamacare decision, but in some ways expectedly upheld those 6 words, said, hey, look, everyone deserves subsidies according to the law. That was the intent of the law. That was the intent of its architects. And Republicans, as a result, suffered another major loss at the court as it relates to the Affordable Care Act. And I was saying earlier, it felt to me like they dusted off their 2012 statement after the court, and they changed the date to, June 25th, 2015, and handed it out to the press because they're saying the same things now that they were saying then. How do you read this? Is this politically smart for them to be insisting that they're going to get rid of the whole thing when 16 million people now have coverage?
I think as it relates to the presidential race, when there are 14 candidates all vying for conservative voters, yes, that's smart. Does it help in a general election? I think it's probably a draw. We saw all these issues litigated in 2012 in the election, and ultimately, voters stuck with President Obama. I don't think it's necessarily good for them in the general election. Here's where it is definitely good for Republicans. having control of Congress, having to come up with a solution for all these folks who would have lost subsidies had the court ruled differently would have been an absolute nightmare. We've seen time and again the attack in Republican primaries, both, whether it's in 2012 in the presidential race, in 2014 in the midterms, the attack in Republican primaries, any Republican who cooperates in any way with the healthcare law is, it's apostate. It is like you can't. And so the idea that Republicans were going to have to try to govern and fix these lost subsidies was basically a non-starter. There were some plans and ideas circulating around, but basically they had no plan that everyone could agree on. It would have been an absolute disaster for them. And now they don't have to do that. They can check the box, put out their statement against the healthcare law. They can keep railing against it because they don't own it at all. So for the voters for whom the half of the country that hates it and the half of the country that likes it, but the half of the country that hates it, they can say, hey, no, we're still fighting it. And they don't have to own any of it.
And they don't have to come up with any alternative, as you point out.
Absolutely right.
Which makes the whole thing a lot easier for them. In terms of, though, when they pivot to the general, or even in these debates that they're going to have, when like 30 of them are going to be on stage, I guess, what are they going to be presenting? I mean, is the rhetoric going to be enough? For me, if I'm a Republican voter or if I'm a general election voter, I mean, I've heard these same talking points since 2010. Like, I would, even if I hate Obamacare, I would be like, you guys have had the last 5 years to do something about this, and you've done nothing. You've just been saying the same thing. At a certain point, isn't their base like, you control both chambers of Congress, you don't even have a plan, you don't even have anything you're pushing, you don't even have anything you're forcing Obama to veto? What good are you guys?
Look, we'll see. I think if John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, ends up running for president, I think we can actually have an interesting debate on the Republican side about the health care law, because John Kasich has expanded Medicaid in Ohio. He will be... You can bet that there will be other Republicans railing at him. This was the wrong thing to do, and he will have to defend it. And there will be a debate about the extent to which Republicans should cooperate with this law, about the extent to which Republicans, what they should do if they were to become president on January 20. Actually, I think it's the 21st. I think the 20th is a Sunday, 2017. What they would do about it beyond just the repeal statement. So I think that is the best chance to get a really interesting policy debate around healthcare on the Republican side and see what kind of candidate and what kind of policy emerges from that for the general election. Otherwise, I think you're going to see a field that is largely on the same page, and it's the same page that they've been reading from since the law was passed in March 2010.
And the other question for me, certainly far less contentious, is what role Obamacare is going to play for Hillary. If you read her statement yesterday about the decision, she obviously praised it, but she also had a line in there that said, while Obamacare is imperfect, it has provided coverage to all of these Americans. And that really made me think, how is she planning to improve it? Is she going to have an actual health care proposal that builds on the law? And what elements she's looking at to tweak a little bit? Because, Hillary is no liberal firebrand, I don't think, when it comes to health care, certainly. And so I'm curious. I'm very curious to see, can she start a conversation, a real practical conversation? Because this thing isn't going anywhere. The question now is, can you tweak certain aspects of it to make it work better?
I think you're absolutely right about it. First of all, her not being the most liberal. In the 2008 presidential debates, when it was her and then Senator Obama, she had the mandate, which was then seen as the more conservative position. And Barack Obama opposed the individual mandate, of course, ended up embracing it later.
What a good idea.
She has obviously a long history going back to her her experience as First Lady when it comes to healthcare. I think her acknowledgement when she says it isn't perfect, I think that reflects where the public is. Yes, the public is evenly divided on the law and what should happen to it. But if you ask people, if you drill down to people who say they support the law or have a favorable impression of the law, there is a big chunk of folks who say that the law should be improved or doesn't go far enough.
And that's who she's speaking to.
Right, and because she's going to have single-payer advocate Bernie Sanders on a debate stage with
he
her,
can take that side.
he is going
That's right.
to
All right,
advocate
Steve
for a
Shepard,
more
we got to
progressive
leave it there.
position.
Campaign and elections editor for Politico. Thank you so much for being with us. We'll be back here on the Bill Press Show.
This is the Bill Press Show.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
I'm the retired bishop with the Episcopal Church as the bishop for all chaplains in federal service. I read that there was a group of people that represented a sense of injustice that I had. I mean, there was a kind of a hope that maybe Trinity Church would be gracious and give refuge. We picked this day where we would gather and demonstrate that Trinity was closing its ears to what was happening. We marched around the block, and I realized that, my goodness, they're carrying a ladder. And I thought, well, this is the moment. You could feel a spiritual presence. You could feel a certain something. And then the cops came in. It got brutal.
Yeah, I'm with you right here. Robin, I'm here.
The church needed, in this moment in history, to stand alongside of these protesters. The truth of Christ is found in the pews, is found in the institutional church, but it is also found in the streets. It's found in the honesty and the integrity, the insistence of people that you find in Occupy Wall Street.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
This is the Bill Press Show.
58 minutes after the hour of the Bill Press Show. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, here for Bill Press. We've talked about Obamacare in the beginning of the program. Well, get ready, because hour 3, Sam Baker, an old health care hat, is going to be here with me, staff correspondent for the National Journal. We're going to dissect what it all means for the policy of healthcare, for the politics of healthcare. You're going to want to stick right here on the Bill Press Show. And your calls at 866-55-PRESS.
This is the Bill Press Show.
It is possible to read the history of this country as one long struggle to extend the liberties established in our Constitution to everyone in America. In other words, who, according to our laws and culture, gets to be considered a person? The law creates legal personhood, and movements create law and change culture. So, how have the courts passed laws to shape our culture? That history goes way back before Citizens United. 1819, Dartmouth College versus Woodward, Supreme Court case, turned a corporate charter from a government-granted charter to a contract. This ruling gave corporations standing within the Constitution. 1886, Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. Though the court did not rule on corporate personhood, the decision was subsequently cited as a precedent to hold that a private corporation is entitled to the same 14th Amendment rights of due process and equal protection as human beings. This makes it impossible for us to make laws that treat local businesses any differently than giant multinational corporations, even if their business practices are deemed to be harmful to workers, the environment and communities, or if they have a history of violating the law. Hale versus Henkel, 1906. The court granted corporations the Fourth Amendment search and seizure protection. Dodge versus Ford Motor Company, 1919. The Michigan Supreme Court says the business corporation is organized and carried on primarily for the profit of the stockholders. Stockholder primacy is established. The purpose of the corporation, according to the court, is no longer to serve the public good, as it had been. It is now to maximize profit for shareholders above all else. Pennsylvania Coal Company versus Mahon, 1922. Corporations get the Fifth Amendment takings clause, meaning if you pass a regulation that impacts a corporation's ability to make a profit, that is deemed a taking, and they can sue for the right to future profits lost. This creates a chilling effect, and local and state governments become much more hesitant to pass laws in the public interest for fear that corporations can claim loss of potential profits that cities and states will be on the hook to pay. Buckley versus Vallejo, 1976. The Supreme Court rules that spending money to influence elections is protected under the First Amendment, in effect saying that money is speech. Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, 2010.
Today, the Supreme Court of Chief Justice John Roberts declared that because of the alchemy of its 19th century predecessors in deciding that corporations had all the rights of people, any restrictions on how these corporate beings spend their money on political advertising are unconstitutional.
The court's ruling threatens to undermine the integrity of elected institutions across the nation. It's a rejection of the common sense of the American people.
What gets you into college? Good SAT scores? High GPA? Lots of extracurriculars?
Sure, but what you really need is money.
If you don't have the cash, you'll need a loan.
And we mean huge student loans because the cost of college has risen 1,000% in the last 30 years.
This means big money for the banks that collect fees and interest.
Now, millions of young people are starting their adult lives with an average of $29,000 of loans on their backs.
Altogether, we're talking $1.2 trillion in student debt.
And more people are finding it impossible to pay them back. Welcome to the student debt crisis.
The increasing demand for higher education and cuts to state funding gave colleges a huge incentive to keep inflating prices.
I graduated about a year ago, currently in $35,000 of debt.
I am in debt about like $25,000.
I owe $23,000. I owe over $50,000 in student loans.
38.8 million Americans owe money on a student loan. And the biggest names in banking are making huge profits off the booming student loan industry. Sallie Mae, the largest provider of private student loans, made $949 million last year.
They only give you about 6 months to look for a job. You have to start paying back the loan. It's very pressuring, especially nowadays. It's very hard to find a job.
Over half of the students graduating in 2012 could not find a decent paying job.
They either had low-wage jobs or unpaid internships or were unemployed altogether.
So you can't make the payments. You start incurring late fees, which makes the loan even harder to pay off.
And it stays with you for years, even decades.
Right now, a third of the people who started repaying their loans are delinquent or in default.
That's 13.7 million people, more than the populations of Chicago, New York, and San Francisco combined.
Worse, it's not just the borrowers who are in trouble. Many loans require co-signers.
So if the student is unable to pay, that co-signer, a father, a mother, or a grandparent, is now on the hook.
Even a grandparent's Social Security benefits can be garnished to pay the loan.
We should have an answer to this. If you get really behind in your car payment or your credit cards, you can file for bankruptcy.
But Congress has made it nearly impossible to discharge student loans through bankruptcy.
Big institutions make big profits while students try to make ends meet under crushing debt.
Is this how we want our education system to work?
The whole point of going to college is to get the career you want, but lately that's been discouraged because no one can afford school. You get a job just to pay off your student loans.
We need higher education, not higher debt.
Sign up to end the student debt crisis at higherednotdebt.org.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
Broadcasting around the nation, on your radio, on your TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
All right. Hey, hey, ho, ho. Obamacare's got nowhere to go. That's the chant.
You can work on that.
Well, that's the chant I perfected yesterday.
Perfected is such a strong word.
In front of the Supreme Court after 6 justices said, we think that Congress really meant to give subsidies to everybody. And we're going to keep it that way. And you're welcome, Republicans, because now you don't have to come up with alternatives and you don't have to explain to the 6.5 million people who could potentially have lost coverage. You don't have to tell them what you're going to do for them, how you're going to help them. You just can continue rhetorically opposing the law, and good luck getting rid of it. All right, I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, filling in for Bill Press on this Friday, June 26th. 2015. You, of course, can listen to us on your favorite progressive talk radio station on Free Speech TV on youtube.com/TawkrTV. Or, of course, on the iHeartRadio app, on the TuneIn app, but you know that because you're listening. Joined here in the studio by Peter Ogburn.
Hi, Igor.
Hey.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Doing a great job, of course.
I know. Elisa Murphy on the board.
Happy Friday.
Thank you. Jamie Benson taking your calls, and Cyprian Bolding making us look oh so good on the YouTube stream there, youtube.com/TawkrTV, and of course on Free Speech TV. Sam Baker, who's a staff correspondent for the National Journal, is here with me to discuss the court, to discuss the big Obamacare win. Sam and I think, first met, probably, 2009, 2010.
Around there.
Yeah, when you were a reporter for a publication called Inside Health Policy. I'll remind you of that. That's right. We'll talk about how far we've come from those days to today, but first...
This is the Full Court Press.
Just a couple of other stories making news. Google has a new plan. It's called Sidewalk Labs. Have you heard about this? Sidewalk Labs.
No.
That is their way to roll out free Wi-Fi across all of New York City.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm dead serious. So here's what they're doing. They're taking over 10,000 of New York's old phone booths to put in supported Wi-Fi pylons, is what they call them. And they're going to be hubs for wireless fidelity all over the city. They're also going to convert those to provide cell phone charging and free domestic phone calls using touchscreen information. They're hoping that they can roll this out all around the world. This is a report by Bloomberg News. And they're saying that hopefully they'll have these up and running by the fall of this year in New York.
So you can be outside in New York and you'll be able to get online.
Yeah, we're using Wi-Fi.
Wow.
On your phone.
Wow.
Crazy, right?
Crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
Crazy. And amazing.
The future is here.
How much are they going to charge for that?
I don't know.
We'll find out.
Yeah, who knows? Shepard Fairey, the Obey giant, the Hope Change guy that did the big Obama thing, right? So he's still creating work. He's still out there doing his graffiti thing. He was in Detroit, or Detroit, last month, and he put up the largest mural of his career. And he took photos of it, and he said he was going to be putting stuff around. Well, the Detroit police are not happy about it. In fact, they issued an arrest warrant for Shepard Fairey earlier this week. He faces 2 counts of malicious destruction of property, which carry a maximum penalty of 5 years in jail, plus fines that can exceed $10,000. They have accused Fairey of causing $9,000 in damages. And they said that next time he comes to Detroit, they will arrest him if he doesn't turn himself in first.
Well, Detroit needs the money, so pay up.
Yeah.
Probably could also use the beautiful public art.
That's
Presumably
right.
beautiful public art.
Yeah, pay the fine, keep the art.
Yeah.
Both sides win.
Never go back to Detroit. I mean, I don't think they're going to come after him.
I don't know, Peter.
It's a tough one.
It's
a tough one.
Hard sacrifice.
And the American Chemistry Council took a look at food waste inside of our households. Right? How much food do you waste when you're cooking?
I don't waste any.
You don't waste it? I'm really good
everything.
about food waste in my house. I rule with an iron fist over what gets wasted. Well, the average American household throws away an average of $640 worth of food every single year. That's how much money we're wasting on food. So it comes down to, how you prep things that you cook, like if you cut too much off of the vegetables that you could be eating, or, trimming too much off of a roast or whatever. If you throw those away, that's food waste. Or making too much food that you don't eat and then throwing that away, that counts as food waste. So we are throwing away $640 per household.
Not good.
That's a lot.
What is it in restaurants? I mean, it must be significantly even way higher.
Well, it's weird because restaurants, in my experience, most of the good chefs that run good restaurants, they're like really, really tight about food waste and food control.
Because it's the margins.
So few things get thrown away. The thing you can't control is what people eat, and what gets sent back. But they're very meticulous. It's a great sort of model for how to not waste food in the restaurant business because everything gets used. Because it costs them money.
Yeah,
if they're good business people.
Yeah.
They don't. But $640 per household.
Wow.
We just thrown it away.
Wow. Well, I'll just eat out from now on.
That's one solution.
They're good at. Yeah,
you're not wasting it if you're not buying
food.
it.
I waste a lot of food. That's what you're telling me.
That's what I'm telling you.
866.
That's a takeaway.
55 Press 866-557-7377 if you want to be part of the conversation. Also on Twitter at BP Show or at Igor Volsky or at Sam_Baker, spelled in the traditional way, Sam and Baker.
Yes.
Sam, I want to ask you, because I feel like a lot of us who have been on this healthcare journey since like 2008, 2009, and watched the process drag on, them trying to make it happen, finally passing it, all of the challenges you saw, both at the core and from Republicans. Just give me some of your feelings, because you have a piece on the National Journal website today. If they were going to kill Obamacare, it would be dead by now. It seems like the law is here to stay. 6 years after, it's finally ingrained. Given what we've been through together for some of it, how do you feel today?
I do feel like this is probably the end of the line for real severe damage to sort of the core pieces of the law. Because if you sort of think about it, going back to all the various threats, all the times this has been at death's door, each time Obamacare has survived, narrowly, but each time the next threat has been a little bit smaller. In 2010, maybe Republicans were going to prevent it from becoming law at all. That seemed like a real possibility. All right, that didn't work out. Then 2012, maybe the Supreme Court was going to throw out the whole thing. That didn't work. Well, maybe they'll throw out the individual mandate, this really important piece. They didn't do that. And now you've moved away from threats to the law itself. King v. Burwell, the case that was decided yesterday, was a lawsuit challenging a regulation, not the actual law. It still could have done major damage that may or may not have been repaired, but it was repairable. And if you look what's on the horizon now, legally speaking, there, other than the Boehner lawsuit, which could be a pretty big deal if it succeeds, they're pretty marginal. They attack at the margins. A lot of them are still contraception suits, which even if that provision was thrown out entirely, which none of these suits even tried to do, the rest of the law could go on fine. So I think we are out of the woods in terms of these big existential threats. And Republicans keep saying that they'll try to repeal it if they win the White House in 2016, even if they mean that now, that's a heavy lift. And I think the best path to repeal for them has always been in the courts. And having not gotten that, I think we're out of the woods.
Let me ask you, because the thing that I think looking forward and trying to figure out where the healthcare story goes now, it was intriguing to me, and I mentioned this last hour, but Hillary Clinton's statement on the court, of course, praising the decision, but then she had this sentence about how while Obamacare isn't perfect, it provides coverage to all of these millions of people. And that got me thinking, well, we know what the Republican healthcare alternative looks like, which is a lot of rhetoric, what we've heard for years across state lines, malpractice reform, high-risk pools, all of these things that get you a very small coverage number in terms of newly insured people. But on the Democratic side, do you think we'll now have a conversation, now that all of this is done, the legal stuff is over, this law is here to stay? Are we going to have a real debate about how we build up from Obamacare, about how we improve the law? And will Hillary lead it?
I doubt it. Because I think...
know what he says.
Yeah, I think if I was a Democrat running for any office, looking back at the past 6 years of political history, I would say, healthcare, don't get that anywhere near me. I'm trying to win over here. But I think in the sort of advocacy level, a lot of the groups that helped sort of create the policy behind the ACA before it was a legislative proposal, that is a conversation that's already starting. I think they've been focused primarily for now on just defending the ACA, but I think attention is starting to turn in that direction. And, where I think they're focused is not even really in expanding the number of covered people, because I think they feel like we've got the model to at least bring everyone in now, but making sure coverage is pretty generous, making sure that benefit mandates are pretty strong, things that aren't as sexy as quote-unquote universal coverage. But I do think that's where the conversation is headed.
Benefit mandates turn me on, okay? So speak for yourself, staff correspondent for the National
You
Journal.
and me will do a special show just on benefit mandates.
That's right. Look, you got that?
Yeah.
Put it on the calendar,
Yeah.
Peter. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. We want to hear your thoughts about this, of course. The other big case that came down yesterday, that was also a big win for Democrats, which shocked, I think, a lot of people, is the fair housing case. It was kind of under the radar. Talk about that.
This was a really important case. I sort of feel bad for it, if you can feel bad for a judicial ruling, because it got overshadowed so much by Obamacare. The issue here, this came out of Texas, right? Low-income housing in Texas is clustered in certain areas. And this lawsuit was brought by a community organization that said, look, the state is putting low-income housing in bad neighborhoods. They happen to be census tracts that are majority-minority, but the schools aren't great. There's not a lot of parks, community amenities. And this organization wants to integrate low-income families into communities that are a little more established to give them a leg up from poverty. So they sued Texas under the Fair Housing Act and said, look, you're not a bunch of racists. You didn't say, let's keep all the poor people over there. But the way the policy has been implemented is having what's called a disparate impact on African Americans. And so the question before the court was whether those suits, disparate impact suits, are allowed. A lot of people thought they'd say that they weren't. And you can see in that scenario how that would take away a major tool to sort of enforce more inclusive housing.
Because there have been a lot of challenges in the past based on this theory that even if the discrimination isn't directly stated, that if the impacts are discriminatory, you can bring a lawsuit.
And you see that in so many parts of American life, especially right now where we're really paying attention, and housing is one really big one. You know, people aren't standing on the steps anymore proclaiming segregation forever, but we still have a lot of lingering segregation. And the court acknowledged that in really plain terms. Justice Anthony Kennedy, in the majority decision, said, look, this law has done a lot of work to make us a more equal country. And this is he sets some parameters. You can't just bring frivolous lawsuits. You have to really prove a disparate impact. You have to do some work there. I don't think anyone would say that was necessarily unreasonable, especially given the outcome. But it was a very significant win for progressives and for groups like this group in Texas that just on the ground are trying to give people a leg out of poverty.
And moving forward, this means that cases like this can move forward in other parts of the country. That if there's a sense that a housing policy discriminates, or the effect of the policy discriminates against a certain group of people, that can be changed through legal action.
Exactly. You won't necessarily win, but you can bring that suit and have your day in court to hear it out.
Yeah.
And the state or the landlord or whoever it is may have to change things up in order to.
Yeah. And these are the real kind of structural racial issues that we have left in our country. We've talked a lot about, obviously, the flag, and it's been in the national conversation in the aftermath of the shooting, and it's really, really important. But at the same time, education, housing, healthcare, a lot of the things there, in many ways, are segregated by race still. Blacks live in one neighborhood, whites live in another. Black life expectancy is lower, they're more prone to certain diseases than white people. Education also very dissimilar. And the more we can bring those together, the closer we can come to, I think, becoming one nation. Sam Baker, we'll be back. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk about what's next, what's coming from the court. You have decision day today and Monday. What can we expect? Sam Baker, staff correspondent for the National Journal. He'll join us after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
They called her Little Sanju. She was born in a village at the foot of the Himalayas, the smallest of 7 brothers and sisters.
My family was very poor. To get by, we raised cows and we made small things for tourists out of bamboo. But we were always hungry, and no matter how hard he tried, my father was always in debt. When I was 11, my father told me I had to go to work making carpets. I had to leave with a man who took me to the carpet factory. The broker who took me away got paid, but they never paid my father anything. I made knots from 4 in the morning until 8 at night. There was never a day off. I was always hungry. I cut my fingers while weaving and had to weave with cut fingers. My hands began to look like my grandmother's. I cried every night. I thought the rest of my life would be only this.
It takes 1 million knots to make one 8x10 rug. In the 1990s, 1 million children were enslaved making carpets in South Asia. Then a hero entered the picture. It was you. If you knew how these carpets were made, you would no longer think they were so beautiful. And if you could choose a better rug, your buying power could end child slavery in the rug industry. From that simple idea, Goodweave was born. Here's how it works. To earn the Goodweave label, companies agreed not to employ children. Goodweave makes sure by conducting surprise inspections. When children are found, Goodweave helps them.
2 years ago, a Goodweave inspector named Grona found me in the factory. When I saw him, I was scared, but Grona put his arm around me and told me it would be okay. Grona took me to Hamrogar, a home for rescued carpet kids run by Goodweave. I'm the first person in my family to ever go to school.
Today, thousands of children like Sanju have been educated and rescued by Goodweave. And because you chose the Goodweave label, 3/4 of those million children weaving carpets are now free. And Sanju, with Goodweave's support, she's able to attend her village school and live at home where she belongs. Now that's a beautiful rug that tells a beautiful story. Stand with Sanju. Insist on the Goodweave label.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
This is the Bill Press Show.
All right, 26 minutes after the hour, the Bill Press Show continues for this Friday, June 26th, 2015. In studio, Sam Baker, staff correspondent for National Journal, and he focuses on the Supreme Court, so it's a busy season for you.
Yes.
2 more decision days, today and Monday. What can we expect?
The marquee issue, obviously, is same-sex marriage. But we have a couple of other really significant cases between here and there, presumably. One, a challenge to the redistricting lines, the congressional redistricting lines in Arizona, which is a pretty significant case for election law and the redistricting process. A challenge to some EPA regulations that could really set back a pretty significant part of President Obama's environmental agenda. That's still on the radar. We also have a pretty significant death penalty case. This is one out of Oklahoma that is alleging that one of the drugs used in lethal injections doesn't work and that therefore it's cruel and unusual punishment. It's actually the anesthetic that doesn't work, so then people can feel the drugs that kill them, which obviously hurt tremendously. It's supposed to feel like being set on fire. But, the reason that case is so interesting is because a lot of the lethal injection drugs have become unavailable just because of public pressure applied by death penalty opponents. And the conservatives on the court are pretty frustrated by that. We said you can have the death penalty, and now they're just making it impossible. So it'll be really interesting to see whether, that frustration sort of wins out and they say proceed, or if sort of the public opposition has scored another win.
And we've heard a lot about this idea that is the court turning to the left. Certainly the 2 decisions yesterday, the fair housing and the Obamacare ruling, and marriage today, or tomorrow or Monday, which everybody expects to go towards marriage equality. What do you make of this argument that has the court become liberal?
I am not quite ready to go there yet. I think the Roberts Court is still relatively concerned with keeping the executive branch in check on issues like voting rights. You've seen a pretty conservative bent, certainly on the First Amendment generally and campaign finance. But, it's hard not to see a trend with Obamacare.
Yeah, 2 more days. We'll see how they do. Sam Baker, staff correspondent for National Journal, thank you so much. We'll be back right after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
This is my computer.
This is your computer. Let's go on the internet.
Let's go. Click it.
Yes.
Okay.
Eye cursor in between the R and the E. Pressing dot, I want you to just push the period.
She's gonna love me all over again.
That's it. Jamaica, here you go.
Here we go.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did it by myself. Feel smarter.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. You know, but it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, you know, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
All right. I know this isn't any fun to talk about, but we should. Okay. So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice.
And I'll try to get the generator going without any gas.
Oh, let's not forget the cell phones, which probably won't work.
Right.
And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
Well, I think we couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Hey, thanks for stopping by. You know, I followed your character since the first episode. I'm a big fan. Big fan.
Thank you.
And listen, your storyline, it makes for incredible TV drama. Thing is, your drug use is very adult content. Too adult for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, have a good one.
You're a nice lady.
Connect with The Bill Press Show on Twitter. Follow us at BP Show and tweet using the hashtag WatchingBP. This is The Bill Press Show.
Yes. Please tweet at us at BP Show, at Igor Volsky. Let us know what you think. 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. We want to hear from you on all of the issues in the news today. What we've discussed, Obamacare, the funeral in Charleston that President Obama will be speaking at later this morning, and of course the possible upcoming rulings from the Supreme Court, both today and Monday. The biggest case we're all waiting for is, of course, the marriage equality decision, Obergefell versus Hodges. And with me in studio now is Brandon Lawrence. He's the Communications Campaign Director at the Human Rights Campaign. Brandon, welcome back to the program.
Morning.
So Jim Obergefell is the plaintiff here. What's his backstory?
So Jim got married to his partner some years ago in Maryland, actually. They got married because he had ALS and had to fly to. So they flew to the tarmac in Baltimore and got married there. They'd been together for years and years and years, and had wanted to get married in Ohio, but couldn't because of the partner, Jim's partner, who was getting ill. And so they got married, went back to Ohio, and Jim's partner died, actually. And the state of Ohio did not, because they didn't recognize Jim's marriage, refused to put Jim's name on the death certificate. And so, he was listed as single, his partner on the death certificate. And Jim felt, this was, not right. They were married. They've been together for years. And the last document recognizing, his partner's existence.
He was not a part of it.
Yeah. So they went to court to try and get Jim's name properly put on the certificate, and that's essentially what led the case going to the Supreme Court.
And here's Jim yesterday talking about his anticipations for the ruling and what they will mean for him and his partner.
I owe it to my husband. I promised him I would see this through to the end, and the end is inside that courtroom.
He said it really comes down to 4 words.
The thing that's most at stake here are those 4 words above the front door of the Supreme Court building. Equal justice under law.
Yeah, equal justice under the law. And certainly the anticipation coming out of the court is that in an opinion written by Justice Kennedy, I think as most of us expect, who has written a lot of these gay rights cases, that the Supreme Court will strike down bans against same-sex marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's going to be really interesting is sort of how a lot of the candidates react to this. There was a story in National Journal this morning saying 2 of the candidates, who are running for president to watch are really Bobby Jindal and John Kasich, because they are governors of 2 states that currently lack marriage equality. And as governors in a state that lacks marriage equality, they can have an impact on how quickly a ruling on marriage equality is implemented.
And to me, this is a real opportunity. This is a real opportunity for Republicans. By the way, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. I want you to weigh in here because for me, Republicans are losing on this issue. They're not going to win this. They're not going to win it with their base. Even Republicans are increasingly supporting marriage equality. So what better opportunity than a Supreme Court decision to get up there and say, you know what, this issue has been decided, we're moving on. I may not necessarily personally super support same-sex marriage. I'm not going to be performing any same-sex marriages anytime soon. But the justices have spoken. The nation has decided. They've been moving in this direction increasingly. And now we're just going to abandon this as an issue. I mean, can you see somebody like, let's say, maybe Jeb Bush, maybe Chris Christie, maybe Scott Walker, maybe Kasich, John Kasich, as you mentioned, the Ohio governor who's not in the race officially, kind of using that as a pivot to close off that issue and to politically bring in some of the young people who are resisting Republicans because they view them as homophobic.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's an enormous opportunity for a candidate. I don't know who it'll be. I think a lot of the folks that you named have sent signals they're not going to do that. If you look at Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio in the last month, they explicitly said to an evangelical news outlet that they don't believe there's a constitutional right to same-sex marriage. But John Kasich is an interesting one to watch. He could well be someone who kind of says the court has had their say, let's move on. And I think you're right. I'm a former campaign operative. If you're looking at this from the perspective of a campaign, there's a lot, aside from it being the right thing to do, there's a lot of potential media attention and upside to just sort of getting on board with the 60% of the country who thinks this is the right thing to do.
A recovering campaign operative.
Yes.
Brandon. To me, for every kind of pull towards justice and equality and bringing more people into society and into the political process, there's always a pushback from certain elements of society who don't support that, who feel threatened, who feel marginalized, who feel that their culture, their world, as they know it, is slipping away. And there's been, I think, a lot of attention on some groups and some states and some candidates like Mike Huckabee, the former Arkansas governor, who's running for president, who are saying, we are not going to abide by this ruling. And people who believe in God, they'd say, are not going to listen to this. We're going to push back. We're going to pass laws like the ones we saw in Indiana. And we're going to do everything we can to avoid recognizing same-sex couples. How powerful do you think that pushback, that backlash is going to be?
I think the indications are so far that they're sort of singing to an empty house. And so if you look at what happened in Indiana, certainly there's been a lot of polling to suggest that Mike Pence went into that thinking it was the easy thing to do and would rev up his base and bring everyone together. It split his own party and made him a less popular governor. And then this morning, we released new polling at the Human Rights Campaign to say, so we asked people, ran a national poll of 2016 voters, likely voters, and said, if a candidate for president opposed marriage equality, would you be more or less likely to support them? And what the polling showed is that 55% of voters were less likely to support someone who opposed marriage equality. And what's really important in that information is there's a lot of swing voters in that group. And so, everyone talks about Washington being more polarized. When it comes to the issue of LGBT rights and marriage equality, this is one of the rare areas where people are actually becoming less polarized. And so you see a big chunk of independent voters and a big chunk of people who voted for Republicans in the last congressional election are coming over to the side of marriage equality.
The big question, I think, for people kind of figuring out how is it possible that from 2004, when you had 19 marriage bans on the ballot in all those different states, to 2015, gay, lesbian, bisexual people have made so much progress on this issue. And what lessons can other causes, either for transgender rights, which in some instances kind of the next civil rights battle for the LGBT community, and worker protection, of course, but other groups fighting for immigration, for other kinds of equality, what can they learn from the LGBT movement?
One of the things that we've learned is that it's really important for LGBT people to tell their personal stories, and that if once people get to know someone who's gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, they're much more receptive to the idea of equality. And so you see this again in our new polling. While 55% of people said they'd be less likely to support an opponent of marriage equality, when you look at people who know someone who's LGBT, that number goes up to 63%. And if you talk to someone who maybe knows a couple who's been married or is in a committed relationship, that number goes way up to 73%. So it's really important for LGBT people to constantly be telling their stories. And it's sort of the theory of change is that once you talk about your personal experiences, people are much more likely to realize you're just like everybody else and deserve equality and equal treatment under the law, just like everybody else.
And once people know more gay and lesbian people, once they see them on television, in media, it doesn't become as scary. It becomes human. It puts a human face on the issue. I guess the next kind of pivot, and you can certainly correct me if I'm wrong here, for HRC, for other gay rights groups, is to say, I would think, is it's great that there's now marriage equality in the country, but it's not over, that the struggle for greater acceptance is not over. Where does the movement go from here?
Yep, great question. I think a lot of folks, it's a natural question. And so let's assume, hypothetically speaking, the Supreme Court rules in favor of marriage equality today. If that were to be the case, there would be 31 states where you could be married You could be fired. You could be denied service. You could be evicted. There's all kinds of potential risks in terms of discrimination because there are no state-based protections in many states.
Yeah, and I want to get into what Congress, what certain lawmakers are doing to tackle those very issues. What's next in the fight for equality? The Bill Press Show. I'm Igor Volsky of Think Progress, filling in for Bill Press. Our number, 866-55-PRESS, 866-557-7377. More on what's coming from the court and the future of LGBT rights right after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
Tune into Free Speech TV for Democracy Now!, a national, independent, award-winning news program bringing you people and perspectives rarely seen on corporate media.
I'm the retired bishop with the Episcopal Church as the bishop for all chaplains in federal service. I read that there was a group of people that represented a sense of injustice that I had. We'd lost Zuccotti. I mean, there was a kind of a hope that maybe Trinity Church would be gracious and give refuge. We picked this day where we would gather and demonstrate that Trinity was closing its ears to what was happening. We marched around the block, and I realized that, my goodness, they're carrying a ladder. And I thought, well, this is the moment. You could feel a spiritual presence. You could feel a certain something. And then the cops came in. It got brutal.
Yeah, I'm with you right here. Robin, I'm here.
The church needed, in this moment in history, to stand alongside of these protesters. The truth of Christ is found in the pews, is found in the institutional church, but it is also found in the streets. It's found in the honesty and the integrity, the insistence of people that you find in Occupy Wall Street.
Tune in to Gay USA with hosts Ann Northrup and Andy Hum for in-depth coverage of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender news. Watch Gay USA every week, only on Free Speech TV.
At Earth Justice, we defend the environment in the courtroom. Join our fight. When you take a seat, you take a stand. Earth Justice, because the Earth needs a good lawyer.
The most valuable morning radio show, according to The Nation magazine. This is The Bill Press Show.
All right, 47 minutes after the hour, The Bill Press Show continues. Made even more valuable this morning by Brandon Lawrence, the Communications Campaign Director for the Human Rights Campaign, as we continue our discussion about the future of the LGBT rights movement, assuming that today or Monday the court rules in favor of marriage equality. Brandon, the fight's not going to be over. what else is on the agenda? Congress is pushing through an LGBT omnibus bill, so to speak, which is like a kind of a compilation of different efforts. There used to be for years the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which it made it illegal for employers to discriminate against LGBT people. That effort's kind of been put on pause, and there's this whole new approach. Tell us about that.
Yep. So the idea is there are a number of states that lack any kind of non-discrimination protections, and it's not just the states don't have employment protections, they don't have housing protections, they don't have protections when it comes to making sure everyone can be treated equally when it comes to public services, going to a restaurant or a theater. And so the idea would be Senator Merkley and Congressman Cicilline have announced they're working on a bill. It has not yet been introduced. But the idea would be federal non-discrimination legislation that would have some core protections for LGBT people when it comes to issues like employment, housing, public accommodations, things like that.
And so this gets at all of them all at once. So you don't have to do kind of effort by effort, issue by issue to make sure there's no discrimination. This is a federal effort to say that, hey, you can't discriminate in employment, as you put it, in housing, in public services. This has got to stop. Do you feel like, certainly the ENDA, the old effort, it has been introduced for like 12 years or something?
Since the 90s,
Since the 90s. It passed different chambers at different times, never made it through. Why now do we think that this, which includes all of these other non-discrimination components, why will this make it if we can't even get employment through?
Well, I think part of the thought here is you don't get what you don't ask for. And so but at a more basic level, this is about our values as Americans. And, part of our values as a country is that equal treatment under the law, and that we should, as a movement, sort of fight for that principle. And, what we've heard at the Human Rights Campaign is there are a lot of LGBT people who feel, who have experienced employment discrimination, for example. When we asked the survey, we surveyed, LGBT Americans and asked, have you been affected by discrimination in your personal life in some way? And more than 60% said yes. And certainly employment discrimination is a big part of that. And so the idea of this bill is, listen, everyone should be judged on their performance. If you're hired, if you're promoted, if you're fired, it should be based on your work, not on your sexual orientation, not on your gender identity, and that, we should all have this equal opportunity to provide for our families, earn a living, just like everybody else. 60%
felt discriminated against. Is there a breakdown there that in terms of employment, housing, public services? Where is the hate the strongest, if you will?
Employment discrimination was far and away the leading sort of category, if you will, that people reported experiencing discrimination.
And this shocks a lot of people. A lot of people don't know that an employer can still hire you because of your sexual orientation or your gender identity.
Yeah, and there are personal, we've come across as we've started, working on this personal story. So there was a young person in Nebraska who, Nebraska is one of these states that lacks state-based non-discrimination protections.
One of 37, you said?
31.
31.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and so he testified when the state legislature there was trying to take up these protections about how he had been fired 3 times, one of which, he said, I worked at a wine shop. I brought my date in for they had an open house type event. And the next day they told me, we don't have any hours for you anymore. And those kind of stories, you run across fairly often in these states.
And you would think that Republicans, who are the party of business and getting people jobs, would really support making sure people aren't fired for attributes that have nothing to do with their job and work performance.
Yeah. Yep, and I would sort of turn that around and say that what we saw in places like Indiana is that there is very little appetite for sort of heading in the opposite direction when you saw the business community sort of united around this principle of, listen, discrimination is not part of our core values. It's bad for our business. It's bad for the image of the states that these debates come up in. So there certainly is every reason to think that there's a lot of support for this issue.
Yeah, and it's interesting that businesses have been leading the way on LGBT issues, and they might very well lead the way for this omnibus bill. All right, Brandon Lawrence, Communications Campaign Director for the Human Rights Campaign. Follow him on Twitter at Lawrence, BLL Lawrence, 2 L's, BLL Lawrence on Twitter. I'm at Igor Volsky on Twitter. Follow me as well. We'll be back right after this.
This is the Bill Press Show.
When I started learning about nutrition, about which, by the way, much less is known than you might think, I learned that what mattered most about one's health was not necessarily the nutrients, good or bad, that you were consuming or staying away from, or even the calorie counts. But what predicted a healthy diet more than anything else is the fact that it was being cooked by a human being and not a corporation. Corporations cook very differently than people do. They use vast amounts of salt, fat, and sugar, much more than you would ever use in your own cooking. And the reason they do that is those are 3 incredibly attractive and incredibly cheap ingredients. And when they're layered properly, as in a chip or pastries and forms of junk food, they're incredibly addictive. They really press our buttons. They activate our dopamine network, our cravings. And in fact, people in the industry, they don't talk about addiction in the food industry, even though they traffic in addiction. They talk about craveability. It's the same thing. And snackability is another term they use, which is a lovely word. And then the last point about corporate cooking that's important to understand is they cook different stuff than you do at home. What they're good at, in general, they don't cook that well, but things like chips, they cook incredibly well. And here's a classic food that if you make it yourself, if you've ever made French fries, you have to wash the potatoes, you have to peel the potatoes, you have to slice the potatoes, you have to fry them in a lot of oil, you have to spatter your entire stovetop. You have to clean up, and then you have this pot of oil you have to get rid of. I mean, it's really difficult, and it's a pain. They're wonderful, but it's a pain. And if you make them yourself, you'll only eat them every 6 weeks, 2 months, because it's too much work. But when you let corporations cook for you, it's so simple and so inexpensive, and they're really good, that you will have them twice a day, as many people in America do. So you see the kinds of foods you end up with are these labor-intensive foods and desserts. These special occasion foods become everyday foods when we let industry cook for us. Eat anything you want, just cook it yourself.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
This is the Bill Press Show.
57 minutes after the hour. Igor Volsky closing out the Bill Press Show for this Friday, June 26th. And I think the upshot of today, of this show, is that I'm very excited. I'm very excited about the Obamacare ruling we just had.
You still haven't come down off of this high.
Well, this is because of this.
Right, sure.
It's coffee, guys. It's coffee.
It's gin. He's lying.
Yes, I start at 6. I am Russian. So
it's vodka then.
Well, of course. Come on, gin. And I'm excited about what's to come from the court. The marriage decision, there's the redistricting decision I don't think is going to go the right way at the court. But we'll see. They surprised us. They surprised us with the housing. Is the court really turning to the left? Is it really? They're becoming more progressive? Maybe. We'll find out. Lots of excitement. I'm going down there right after this, going down to the court. I think I'll see rainbow flags, people in T-shirts, just people pumped for America.
A lot of excitement.
Pumped for America.
You're going to bring a lot of excitement there, right?
Yes, that's right. All right, thank you so much. Have a good weekend. We'll see you Monday here on The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.